Lots of familiar faces and some new ones also, which is great. And it seems to be 11 o'clock here on the East Coast, and that means it's time to be official. We have 20 people with us so far. That's great. Um, Good morning, afternoon, evening to all of you from wherever you are, and I see several continents represented and several countries within that. That's great. Um, we are back again. I wish I could have been at last week's session, but I did get to listen to it. Um, it looks like there was a lot of fun and some good back and forth talk. Dan, thanks for filling in as MC. You kept things going nicely, um, and we're off again and running. This week we have a presenter um, who is somebody that we haven't had on here before, but I hope maybe we'll have on again. Um, I saw him do a presentation many years ago in Germany on sequence, and I thought, oh goodness, I know what sequence is. You're either in or you're out, and he totally fascinated me with his perspective of what's looking at it. And Lorenz, I hope you will do that for us sometime here. It was really good. Um, Today he's going to be talking about Four Ladies chain effect and looking at how to use it efficiently. Um, it turns out it's going to be more leaning towards the technical zero effect of it, but that should be interesting. So our presenter today is started dancing 38 years ago, started calling a few years later, and eventually member of Caller Lab, an accredited caller coach, currently an accredited caller coach emeritus. Just for laughs, he supports himself by a full-time job as a programmer currently working in cybersecurity. So don't mess around here, guys. And his programming talents have also taken him into the world of helping square dance callers with one of the earlier square dance software programs that moved dancers around for you. Was it the first one that did animations, Lawrence?
Yeah, I think so.
First one that did animation.
Now we're doing great. We're doing great. We're getting there.
And the name of the program is WinHash. It's still available for Windows. Gee, if I made one in conjunction with your same source code that you lost, I could call it MacHash. Except I'm not a programmer, so I'm not going to do it. Anyway, without me killing. Oh, and Lorenz is somebody that I first met when I was teaching a caller school in Germany with Al Stevens. Al invited me over to join him, as he did with many of the caller coaches back then. I think I had the opportunity to do 4 or 5 of them. Lawrence, were you a student at that first one?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. El made me a student before I changed seats. He said, "You need to be in the learner's chair before you start teaching." So that was good experience.
So the last one I went over, Al brought Lorenz in for doing one of the presentations, the one on sequences, they said, and it was amazing. Anyway, without further ado, without listening to me yak for a long time more, let's give a hand for Lorenz Kuhlee from Germany, who is going to talk to us today and answer your question.
Thank you, Don. Thank you all for inviting me. Yeah, you mentioned technical zeros, and actually this is what this session is about. But it's more the practical way, because when I first did a Caller Lab session with Skip Garvey together on this topic, and it's still recorded many years ago, where we exactly said what is behind technical zeros, what do you need to know, and all this. for beginner callers and even for some experienced callers, way too complicated. But on the other side, it's very useful. So this is why this idea of this seminar came up by saying, hey, why not presenting technical zeros without even mention the name? Now I did it already 3 times. So I changed it to four ladies chain effect behind the curtain, if you would say, think this way, and start with just 1 or 2 modules that has this effect, and 1 or 2 stations where I can share this four ladies chain idea. There's a lot of overlapping with the mental image sessions Don did, when you combining all these methods, module calling, site calling, mental image, and suddenly your brain start to connect the things and you don't even know where it came from before. And that's how this seminar went over. I don't know if 1 hour will be enough, but we see how far we can go. Please make it interactive, because when I start sharing my screen, I begin not to see you. Please just scream in, and if you have a question, anything like this. Why do I think you need to learn about this? Is because you can move and control dancers effectively. We always saying creativity where there's to complicate things. So look at creativity. And I think this is one way to move the dancers all over the place, but as a caller still have the control, even if you're a site caller or a module caller or a mental image caller. So let me share my screen. I hope it's all big enough. It's not tested. I'm just try to do my best here. Let's do this. I hope you can see it. I will not put it in full mode if it's big enough, because then the screen will mix up again, but we can figure out it. Is that okay, Don, or?
Yes, fine.
Okay. Okay. So the roadmap of this session, of this 1 hour, is the idea, and we have already talked about it. The motivation, why it's good to have this knowledge. We go into a little bit of theory, but it's not technical zero theory. Theory. It's I want to go away from this very technical definition of what is a technical zero, but rather show you some examples, and then maybe we can have some exercises and exchange. So first of all, what is the difference? What is the left side box? The left. And somebody help me make it
That
interactive.
looks like a corner box to me.
Yes, so this is a normal after head square through 4. We are there. We know it's a 0 box, corner box, and I can call an element left and would be home. If we compare this to the other box I put on the right-hand side, the right box, and if we compare it, but not using technical terms as phasor, as formation, arrangement, sequence, relationship, I want in your mind go away from this. I want to that you have it visually. What is the difference? How can we describe it, anyone?
What you're looking for is the one on the left is a head square through box, and the one on the right is a side ladies chain head square through box.
Yes.
It's actually a 4 ladies chain, Mel.
I'm sorry, 4 ladies. Thank you, Don.
What I see with a quick look, Lorenz, is that in the first picture, the sides are paired with their original partner. And in this, on the picture on the right, the heads are paired with their original partners.
Yes. Yeah.
And I see it as through trade by.
Yes.
Also, on the left box,
we come exactly. We come to that pass to trade by. Exactly, we come to that, and that's exactly where the technical zero is behind. But everything that you said is right and correct and smart. The way I want you to look at this is that this is this is a 0 box, as we know, on the left side, and this is a 0 box with everybody as a 4 ladies chain. So meaning, if I look at the outside couple, or if I look only, let's start with the boys. The boys are exactly where the boys is, left and right, nothing changed. But the girls change to the opposite. Where girl number 4 stands is now girl number 2, opposite. Where girl number 3 stands is the opposite, girl number 1. You see, that's just a different view. So for me, this is in my head, the right-hand box is still a 0 box, but I cross my fingers behind my back and telling me this is plus a 4 ladies chain. Question so far, because this is the elementary idea of this, what we're gonna do. Now it becomes complicated for a side caller. It may be smaller, but see it. On the top row, you see all vertical 0 boxes that exist. There are 4 of them. All are 0 boxes, but with a different inside rotation, if you want to say it this way. And below the vertical line is a 0 box plus a 4 ladies chain with all its 4 positions. And we are used to, as side callers, I can visualize a head square through 4. I can see that. But if I look the top row, let's say the number, let's say 1, 2, 3, this box. If I start with the head square through 4 and then I do side calling, and I will not, my brain is not smart enough to figure that out on the fly with good flow and good ideas that this is also a 0 box. Maybe with a lot of experience, yeah, but there are 4 0 boxes. And if we add them, rotate them 90 degrees, there are 8 0 boxes. And that's where it becomes nice for dancers, because if you call element left from the first spot, you'll be right at home. If you call element left from this spot, you are 4 steps or 3.5 steps, as I used to say, without the twirling of the girls with the joke. Here you have like the promenade 8 steps away. And here, if you call element left, it's 3/4 to go home. Yeah. So that gives you a different element spots, and there's where the overlapping with mental image comes in. And here you see all the boxes, and my brain never will figure out if I randomly come to one of these that I really can see, oh, this is a 0 box with the 4 ladies chain effect. So what would be a, let's have a demo to show you what happens. So that is the head square through 4. I can speed up the animation, but I want you to enjoy. This is the 0 box. And oops, you see, it's an old program. If I go head star through, pass through, or centers pass through, whatever that is. Now I don't know how to use my program. I'm nervous. Do you know where I am here? After head star through pass through, if we talking module calling, what is this position referred to?
Right-hand lady box.
Or an across the street box.
Across the street box. Yeah, using that terminology, across the street box or station 2. And we have talked many times about the and how useful the chicken plucker path is, right? So from a 0 box, how do I go there? Right and left through, dive through, pass through, I'm here. So this special box, the new box that I want to introduce, is across the street box plus a right and a left through. And that's easy to remember. And here, this is the box. This is a 0 box with the 4 ladies chain. If you look at the men are in sequence, and if you look at the ladies, it's the opposite, as we have said before. Can you see that? And how do I get back? This is this special box I want to talk to you, but not thinking about technical 0 or anything. Thinking about this is in your mind, this is a 0 box plus a 4 ladies chain effect. And the get out could be element left, right and left grand, go 7 hands or go on the 3rd hand. and promenade home. So instead of having head square through 4, and we're not talking hand availability or flow or anything, if I call head square through 4, I can call an element left, right and left grand, and promenade home. If I be in the special box, which is across the street box plus a right and left through, and I give this box a name in a minute, I can call element left, right and left grand, promenade home, and I have the opposite. Or I can call element left, right and left grand on the third hand, and I be with my partner. Yeah. If I call head square through 4, and if you think of pass through trade by from this special box, where would I end? Where would I end after head star to pass through station 2 plus a right and left through? That's across the street box plus a right and left through. How do I get from there to a 0 box? Anyone?
So, so from here to a 0, wait.
No? Okay, I go back. I
Say that
said,
again. Yeah, thanks.
yeah, like from head star through. Pass through. This is station 2. And this is the special box we are talking about. This is a 0 box with the 4 ladies chain. How do I get to a 0 box from here?
Pass through trade by obviously will get you there.
Yes. Does everybody agree? Because I don't see your faces. I not see you nodding or shaking the heads or disappearing. Is that okay? Pass through trade by. Let's try it.
Yes.
Pass through trade by. And that's a 0 box, right?
Yes.
So how do I get from here, from the 0 box to this special box? With the chicken plucker, I can call right and left through, dive through, pass through, right and left through. However, if pass through trade by brought you here, and we know when in trouble do a double, and 2 times pass through trade by is the same. So if I go from the special box with the pass through trade by to a 0 box, what happens if I call from a 0 box where we are in pass through trade by? What is that kind of box?
There's your 4 ladies chain box.
It's my 4 ladies chain box, but 180 degrees rotated. So if I call a chain 4, which we all know will rotate the square 180 degrees, gives you a proof that this is our station 2 plus right and left through visible. So from here, I can call again, pass through trade by, and I exchanging with pass through trade by from one box to the other. Make sense? Good. Now to add a little bit of technical 0, because I think you all understand, technical 0 depends on sequence. So if I call 2 ladies chain, I change the sequence. If I call 2 ladies chain again, we are again here, right? In this formation. So pass to trade by is a 0. But as you see, it's a 4 ladies chain. But when it's used in another state, because it's a technical 0, now I don't know if I'm too complicated, but I give you a visual in a second, then it is a 0. So this is a 0 box. If I call 2 ladies chain, I change the sequence. Now I call this magic pass through trade by. And of course, I need another 2 ladies chain at the end, because 2 ladies chain does nothing. You see, I be in a 0 box. So from a 0 box, pass through trade by is a 4 ladies chain box. If I change sequence and call pass through trade by and change sequence again, because I have to be a 0 and I show you that again and demo it twice and 3 times. It's a 0 box, so I can call element left. And before I go back to the slides, let me show you the very easiest technical 0, I think at least. Heads lead right, circle to align. We know where we are, right? 0 line. Now maybe you know, or you came across this, or maybe not, doesn't matter. If I call bend the line, what is this? 0 line.
A line.
A line. Bend the line, it's still a 0 line. Bend the line must be a 0, right?
Right.
So if I call 2 ladies chain, bend the line and 2 ladies chain, because bend the line does nothing, obviously, bend the line does nothing, right? I can call it again. Bend the line, nothing happened. However, if I change sequence, I call 2 ladies chain, and we're not talking flow or anything, just the thing. I call bend the line, but now I have to call 2 ladies chain again because I started with the 2 ladies chain and bring it back. I have a 0 line again, but with my opposite lady. Instead of a 0 line, I have the opposite lady line.
It's the 4 ladies chain effect.
It's the 4 ladies chain effect. So first of all, bend the line is not a 0, even if it looks like it, very easy. But if you add 2 ladies chain to it, it becomes a 4 ladies chain. That's one thing you can get home. The other thing is, after head square through 4, pass to trade by is a 0, but not from a 0 box, because then you go to the 0 box with the 4 ladies chain effect. And if this sinks in and really is understandable, you can do a lot of things. Let me go back to the beginning, just we did a lot of cards. Okay, so what if, just to tease your brain a little bit, if I start with 4 ladies chain, 4 ladies chain across, and now I call the chicken plucker. I start with heads square through 4. That's a chicken plucker. Or we start from mentally from a 0 box, but remember we started with the 4 ladies chain. Now I do the chicken plucker. I say right and left through, dive through, pass through. This is the chicken plucker, but I add the right and left through because I want to go to this new box. But I started with the 4 ladies chain. Now where am I? In a normal 0 box, because I started with the 4 ladies chain. And this is not understanding technical zeros, but using the effect and just using and limit the call, bend the line and pass to trade by. But you can see you can set up the square to different locations where your element spot is. And I think that's pretty neat. If I start again with 4 ladies chain and head square through 4, and I want to go directly to this new box, not over the chicken plucker with right and left through, dive through, pass through, right and left through, but I want to go directly to it. As we learned, I can just use pass through, trade by. And I think this is pretty neat. If you start with 4 ladies chain and then go with your get in, heads, flutter, wheel, sweep a quarter, pass through, trade by, you're in a 0 box. And now we give this box a name. and then I go back to the slide mode, or I answer question. I don't want to go too fast. Now look
Guys,
at this. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say to the rest of you guys, remember that Lorenz can't get feedback by seeing your faces because of the way his setup is.
Yes.
So he's got to hear your grunts of uh-huh or what. So most of you are muted right now. If you'd unmute, at least you'd get a little feedback and make him more comfortable talking.
So as I posted in the chat, this is all of a sudden making Kip's book make practical sense to me, because I remembered I read Kip's book and was like, why am I learning all this? And yes. And then this also implies that something like an all four ladies chain, heads past the ocean, extend, all eight circulate, puts you in a corner box.
Correct. And this is the next step where we see the pass to trade by effect is couple circulate or pass to trade by or ping pong circulate are all in the same pass to trade by in my mind. But that comes in the next session or in a couple of months. But first understanding or look at differently, don't fear technical zeros, but just think of pass to trade by and think of zero box or a zero box with the four ladies chain effect. So this is a zero box. If I call spin chain through, I don't know, do you use in the US a lot of spin chain throughs? In Germany, Europe, not so often, but once in a while. But
I love spin chain through, even though I usually have to teach it to the floor as I call it to.
Yes. Okay. And often it's the combination with ends circulate twice, correct? Because
Yes.
we don't want the girls stand there. Some weird callers then call whatever girls zoom or something like that, or well, that matter of taste. But look at this. If I call from a head square to four, a normal spin chain through, no girls circulates, whatever. See what happens. If I look at the boys, they are all in sequence. Who do they have for right and left grand?
Opposite.
The opposite. And from where did we start it? From a zero box. Remember, we did zero box, spin chain through. Now you know where this is going, right? If I go to our magic box, oops, not past the ocean. If I call pass through, trade by, that is our new box, right? The station 2 plus a right and left through, our zero box with the four ladies chain in mind. And look at this, if I now call spin chain through, I guess you already know where do I end up with.
Nice.
With my partner. And if I call n circulate twice, then yeah, and spin chain through, by the way, it's not a technical zero. Yeah, but it's a figure, and I show you once in a second again. There are other figures that has a built-in four ladies chain, and combining these with the knowledge we right now have, you can really move the dancers and create different get-ins, different get-outs. Let me stop sharing before we continue to answer your questions that you may have.
Come on.
I'm still warping my brain around this.
I was going to say that my understanding is when spin chain through first came out, it was very confusing for all the callers to figure out how to use it and keep resolving their choreography. And now we can see a little bit of why that may have been the case.
Yes, because you end up with the opposite, and you have to add girls circulate twice to make it happen. But if you would know across the street box plus a right and left through, you don't need the girls circulate twice. Maybe the world have changed in that direction. That's I can follow your thought process, Clark. Very nice.
Lorenz, were you calling that a magic box? Was that your terminology to?
I would call it spin chain through box because it brings you to this to your partner
in sequence. Yeah,
exactly. So I call it spin chain through box, which is station 2 plus a right and left through, and I get there either with the chicken plucker pass or from a zero box with pass through trade by, and it will not get more complicated if you stay with this. This is just trust the method.
So if I'm reading this correctly, you are using this for a new way to look at modules by setting things up with a 4 ladies chain and knowing you can use some of the other stuff you've done before, and that it's still, it only has the, and it, maybe I'm not understanding. Tell me the overall what we're looking at. And I'm curious, if nobody else is asking questions, is it because they're confused or because they understand it much better than I have?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why we want to have this discussion. It's
Right.
For me, it's if I want to on purpose want to set up an element left, right, and left grand on the third hand promenade home. I go to my spin chain through box and call element left from there. If I want a quarter promenade, a half promenade, or a 3/4 promenade home, not to having in Germany or in Europe, they say, they don't do promenades. If you call head square through 4 from here, you call element left, they go home, clap their hands, promenade, we don't need promenade. Why do I have to go full around? I know Martin and other groups are working on that to bring dancing back to square dance, yeah, which is the right thing to do, yeah. But if your dancers do this and you want them to enjoy promenade, why not let them 3/4 promenade? Now, question to you is, can you set up on purpose, not by accident, on purpose, strategically and a way forward, can you set up a zero box where you call element left, right and left grand, and then promenade 3/4 home? With this knowledge, I would set this up with head square through 4.
Need to share your screen again, Lawrence.
Oh,
You're not sharing right now,
oh, sorry. That makes no sense.
which means you can see us. That may be a liability either way. Yeah.
Okay, so I set this up, head square through 4. And I call, let's say, to my spin chain through box using the chicken plucker.
Great play.
I can call pass to trade by, but I use the chicken plucker because I know that from here, right and left through, dive through, pass through, right and left through. This is my box. So if I call from here, element left, and I don't have my partner, so I go right and left grand on the third hand, and then my promenade would be halfway. Yeah, or I call element left and a gimmick, for example, right and left grand, but keep going, not on the third hand, not on the normal hand, but go 2 more hands and you should be home. Or I call 2 ladies chain, pass through, trade by, 2 ladies chain. Where am I? Because I used 2 ladies chain before. My pass to trade by from the spin chain through box would end up in my zero box. but I did a 2 ladies chain and then pass through trade by and another 2 ladies chain, this is again my spin chain through box, because then pass through trade by was a 0. And that's the technical 0 effect. And I know that's difficult in the beginning when you hear this the first time. But if I call now element left, right, and left grand on the third hand, I know people need to promenade 3/4 home. And that is how I use it to have the dancers experience in having the enjoy the dance on different quadrants. They are all in a 0 box, but they don't know it. You think they know it because they dance with the same 4 dancers. I've heard that in many caller schools, they say, if you call head square through 4, the dancers they memorize that they dance with the same 4 dancers. I don't think they memorize the dancers, but they memorize the position. So if I call to another chain box or another, I go back to the slides in a second. I don't want to jump too fast. If I can set up another 0 box, but not with head square through 4, but in another way, it's a totally different feeling for the dancers. And I think they enjoy it. And that's why I think it's good to take a look at this. I will share the slides. I send it to you, Don. We can put it in public. I don't mind. It's all for the better good.
I would love
Lorenz, send it to Dan. He does a better job of putting them up there.
to.
Questions or
I'm still in stunned silence, but yeah, go for it, Don.
I just wanted to throw in that I like your approach of making them do a 3/4 promenade or a half promenade rather than just having them go home. I tend to get sarcastic, and I'll generally say it's okay to promenade when I call it, and sometimes that gets through to them. But yours is a better approach.
Give them the number of steps they need for the promenade, and they will try to see if you're right or not. That will make them promenade.
yes, promenade 8 steps and they start to count, or promenade 16 steps and without the twirling at the end, girls, of course. Yeah, or something like that. Yes. Okay, you want more of it? We have 20 more minutes.
Yes, bring it on.
Yes, wave your hands. Thank you that you're so patient with me. I love the topic. I really try get your checkers out and try this and that's good. So difficult is this picture to see the top row that these are all 0 boxes. We can set this up with this method. We can set up all our spin chain through boxes with this pass through trade by. And you see where all the number 1 man is. 1 time is here, 1 time here, 1 time here, 1 time here. The other one is the same quadrants, but on the third hand, get out, for example, or spin chain through ending with your partner, get out. Different quadrants, different feeling, but full control of where your dancers are. And then for didactical reasons, I added some more of these slides. I say, what is a module again? We know, yeah, from one known phaser, now comes technical terms again, to another known phaser. And interesting is we need to understand this one to use the technical zeros at the end effectively. Is if you start with part 1 of your 0, of your normal 0, working 0, swing through boys 1 wheel and deal, I have, yeah, here. I can put a 0 in between, like it's a mathematical, right? If 0B here in the middle, first line, is a 0, and part 1 of a 0 and part 2 is a 0, then this whole thing is a 0. Am I confusing? But let's take a look. So if you only look at orange, it's swing through, boys 1 wheel and deal. We all know that's 0. I can call swing through, and then another zeros, a very simple one. Boys trade twice. Yeah, boys run wheel and deal. It's still a zero. If I say step to a wave, girls trade, and girls trade at the end, and I call swing through, boys run wheel and deal, it's also zero. Of course, it's the ocean wave here, but so, and using two ladies chain, pass through trade by two ladies chain, then pass through trade by becomes a zero. If you leave out the two ladies chain, pass through trade by is a four ladies chain effect. And that's why I think this knowledge is good. I jump here. And a combination of all, some is a four ladies chain effect, let's call it this. But some is also having inside a four ladies chain effect, with which is, for example, spin chain through, or right and left grand on the third hand, or four ladies chain itself. Or, and we come to that, double pass through and cloverleaf. So I don't know if you know that. When I was a beginner caller, I had difficulties to call cloverleaf because it rotates everything. I don't know where the dancers are, and I just couldn't do in the singing call figure with it. I just couldn't figure it out. And I will show you in a second what double pass through cloverleaf will do. And then we put all the things we have talked together. And then I hope I get some oohs and ahs again. So why do we do this? Yeah, move dancers effectively to different quadrants, work with axes, east and west, north and south, surprising get outs on the fly, but it's not on the fly for us. Creating interesting get outs. Like I said, if I start with a four ladies chain and go directly to my spin chain through box, I'd be in a zero box. So mentally for me, I'm in a zero box just with this knowledge. And I don't start all the time with head square through four. I don't know if you know any, let me know if you know any singing call figure, corner lady singing call figure. If I start with the four ladies chain and then do this singing call figure, I have a right hand lady singing call figures. Are in the US done right hand lady singing call figures still in or hot or hype or nothing?
Mixed bag. Some people like them, some people don't, but generally they shy away from them, from what I've been told.
Yes.
I find it's really handy to have one of those in my pocket in case something goes wrong in the square and I can see to fix it with a right hand lady progression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for one easy thing with the knowledge we have, I call head square through four. It's a zero box. Now I call pass through trade by. I'm still in a zero box, but with the four ladies chain effect, I can call swing and promenade, and I have a right hand lady progression. I have the wrong quadrant. That's why I call an 8 chain 4, so to rotate 180 degrees. Or I can share some other way with stars to pass to tag the line to go to the other side. But anyway, so you have absolutely control of the square. And after all, it doesn't hurt if you learn this because it will just add to your toolbox. What is the thing? I know it's a bit of a learning curve. I admit this. You need to know a little bit about modules and what I refer with Kip. Kip and I use the word marker setups instead of zero boxes or anything. It's just a setup. It's just a formation, arrangement, sequence, relationship that we know. And of course, the willingness to learn something new. We can skip this because we all had it. Here is the bend the line again. Yeah, you see, bend the line in the left doesn't do anything. Bend the line is bend the line. However, if I call two ladies chain, bend the line and two ladies chain, you will see I have a zero line with a four ladies chain effect in my mind. So bend the line is a technical zero. If you want to get your feet wet, I suggest, and as I said, I share the slides, start easy with bend the line, pass to trade by. In the same category of pass to trade by is all eight circulate, ping pong circulate and extend, or couples circulate, some of these types. Also a nice one, but it rotates the axis. So be easy on this one. Just split the outside two and separate around 1-2 align, start through California twirl, which is a technical zero. We often use it from zero boxes, right? From zero boxes, head square through 4. We say split the outside, separate to align, start through California twirl. We do know we are in a zero box again. If you try a 2 ladies chain before, and then split the outside, separate to align, start through California twirl, 2 ladies chain, you will end up in a spin chain through box. It's again, this vice versa, back and forth of using it the right way. Here's another demo, but we did a long demo and I want to keep the clock in mind. But here's another one. And then I demo again. As I said, when I started calling, yeah, I'm 52 now and I started calling when I was 14, so it's a long time, but I couldn't figure out cloverleaf and I avoided it. But if I look at it with this new idea, I don't know if it's new, but if I call head star through, I end up here. What would be my get out? Just simple get out to an element left. Anyone?
Or through 3.
Yes, square through 3 element left, right? It's just, I just want to know if you know the after head star through. If I call double pass through and cloverleaf, I do end up here. So again, if I describe this, if I call square through 3 again in the center, I be in my spin chain through box, because double pass through cloverleaf is a 4 ladies chain effect. It's not a technical zero, but it's a 4 ladies chain effect. So if I call here double pass through cloverleaf and then square through 3, I be in my spin chain through box. If you look at the left picture, how do I get to my spin chain through box? We know square through 3 brings you in the zero box, but how do I go with the chicken plucker pass? How do I go to my spin chain through box after head star through? How do I go directly there?
Pass through, right and left through.
Yeah, pass through, right and left through, correct. So if I call head star through, pass through, right and left through, I be in a zero box with a 4 ladies chain. Makes sense? But now you see what's coming. I call head star through, double pass through cloverleaf, which is the 4 ladies chain, and then I call pass through right and left through, and where am I now? In a zero box, because the double pass through cloverleaf is a 4 ladies chain, and I go directly to this across the street box plus a right and left through is also a 4 ladies chain, and then I must be in a zero box. As you can see here, double pass through cloverleaf, you end up on this right side. If I call centers pass through, right and left through, you see couple number 1, pass to trade by, goes to the outside. And now you start combining 4 ladies chain in the beginning, double pass through cloverleaf as a 4 ladies chain, and you switch to the 1 boxes and to the other. And then you either are in a 4 ladies chain situation or not. I know it's a learning curve, but think of it. Here I am with, let's say heads promenade halfway star through, or heads right and left through star through. I am away a pass through from a zero box. Agree? I call pass through, I'd be in a zero box. So if I call from here, double pass through cloverleaf, and I call then centers pass through, I be in my spin chain through box. However, how can I go from the left-hand box now? How do I go to my across the street box plus a right and left through? And I share you my idea. I would call zoom and then the center square through 3. Can you see that? If I put this couple, zoom, and then center square through 3, I be across the street plus a right and left through. So here's a nice thing, right? Heads right and left through, star through, I be here. Now I call double pass through cloverleaf. Zoom square through 3 element left with the normal 0 box. And without it, I don't know if it's module calling or mental image calling, but I just use the effect of 4 ladies chain and know these 2 positions where I am to create these things. So we talked about this before, pass to trade by. We can skip this. I think let's put it all together in a demo and then we are done. Let's see this visual. Yeah. Head style through. Again, I be a square through 3 from a 0 box away, correct? Let's call double pass through. Cloverleaf. Square through 3. And I be in my spin chain through box. I call spin chain through. Girls smile. Some nasty callers say girls circulate 4 times, but they only do it 1 time and then into a right and left grand. Heads right and left through. Head start through, sorry, right and left through. And I want to go to my special box, to my spin chain through box. Can you see? I call zoom and then center square through 3. That, yeah. So I call my double pass through first. Cloverleaf. And now I go there by zoom and square through 3, and I end up in a normal 0 box with just these few calls and this knowledge. And can you see? I hope you can see. We need to dance it and feel it physical to our bodies. But it's totally different of where the dancers are and where where my element left spots are and I go from here. From here I can do the same thing again, pass to trade by, and then it becomes boring kind of, yeah. Pass to trade by, and here's my spin chain through box again. I can continue with chicken plucker or sorry, I miss a right and left through, of course. Here's my 0 box again. Sorry, the right and left through was missed. Now I'm confusing myself. After pass to trade by, that is my spin chain through box. If I want to go back to a 0 box or again to this other box, yeah, and that is how we play. I stop sharing because I think that was the last slide. Let me double check. Yeah, I just wrote down, instead of element left, right and left grand on the 3rd hand, you can come up with some other get outs. For example, if you say element left in the Alamo style, and then I don't know if you like it or not, but just as ideas, you can play with heads walk and dodge, sides walk and dodge, which is a 4 ladies chain. Or you can say single hinge and boys star left halfway. Or you can say go forward to an element star and then shoot the star. It's also a 4 ladies chain. So there are some ways to get out. I used to have a gimmick. As I say, are you facing your corner? From a station two, I say, are you facing your corner? They say, oh, no. And then I said, right and left through. Are you facing your corner? No, it doesn't work. But I still call element left and then a right and left grand on the 3rd hand. And I get some smiling faces. And that's, I guess, what we all want. So that is what I want to share with you, and we have 5 more minutes, 6 more minutes to discuss. And as I said, I mentioned, I share the slides and we'll discuss and try these 4 or 5 ideas. And of course, and I repeat myself, it takes some time to get this connected. But once you understand, across the street box plus a right and left through is a zero box with a four ladies chain effect. So don't dream about it, but thank you. And let's go into discussion.
I'm here in stunned silence, and I'm going to have to spend a lot of time pushing checkers. But yeah, thank you.
It's made me do some thinking and good stuff. It's sort of expanding what I do mental image. I'll mention that maybe in a moment or two. Daryl, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I can, Lawrence, nice to see you. But I can understand pretty much what you're saying. I'm kind of bouncing over this across the street box. Now, I've been around long enough and called enough of the levels that I understand an across the street box. But I'm find that I'm transferring my across the street box to a right-hand lady box out of sequence or in sequence, or corner boxes instead of zero boxes. To me, it slows me down some to try to figure out if it's that corner box in sequence, out of sequence, opposite lady box, in sequence, out of sequence. So the terminology is, I see what you're doing. I would put it in the category of more modular calling than anything else, because of the actual modules that are being applied there. But very nice, Lawrence, very nice.
Thank you, Darren.
Before we get into discussion, let me make believe it's 4 minutes from now and do the formal ending so we can just do an uninterrupted discussion. But I think I really want to thank Lorenz for joining us. Hope you'll just join us as a participant on some of these others. Plus, I still want to have some more presentations too. I want to thank all you guys for coming. I'm glad we're up and running after the long holiday break. I don't know if I should admit this or not, but I don't have anybody for next week yet, but I have two people that are, I think, going to be really interesting coming up in the very near future. Maybe one of them will be ready by next week. Somebody sent me a suggestion on whom to contact, and I did, and so that's one of the people coming. If you guys have suggestions on people you want to hear, by all means, let me know. Again, thank you guys for coming. Thank you. Let's have some noise for Lorenz. Thank you for joining us. And if you feel like you've only designated an hour and thank you, Dan, for pushing the buttons and muting everybody when necessary, and especially for putting the recordings up. Again, if you have only designated an hour for this, you can slither out and we won't hold you accountable. But if you want to hang around and chat some more, I'll be here. I'm sure Lorenz will. I know Dan will. We could get into some interesting thoughts on this. So, on with the show. Anybody else have something they want to spit out before I get talking about mental image? Clark?
Several comments. One was, I appreciated that when early on in your talk, when we had the eight pictures, 4 on the top that were the different corner boxes and 4 on the bottom, that you said that as a caller, just going along calling, you couldn't instantly recognize that the dancers were specifically in any of those positions, because I too, generally don't know, just looking at the square quickly, oh, we're in a corner box or a this or a that. So that's good. And what we were doing was manipulating the dancers to those places and knowing that that's where we are because of how we got there, not because we could just do a snapshot image and see it. So that was point number 1. Point number 2 is, while the talk isn't specifically on technical zeros, we did certainly brush up against that in that terminology. I've always been fascinated with them. And one thing that I found surprising early on in talking and learning about technical zeros is that the call four ladies chain is a technical zero. And that kind of is the basis of a lot of what you're doing. So I'll let other people talk a bit, but I think it's worth showing an example of a sequence where we can leave four ladies chain in or not call it and still have the whole square resolve, because that shows that four ladies chain is a technical zero. And initially it sounds impossible. How could you have a sequence where I can either do the four ladies chain or not and still have the whole sequence work? So I'll leave that for later after others have spoken.
Yeah, because if you call head ladies chain and then four ladies chain and then head ladies chain again, four ladies chain is a zero.
In a similar, oh, sorry, go ahead, Doug.
No, go ahead. I'm
Yeah, one of the ways that the first time I saw it, and great presentation, Lawrence, it actually put a lot of things that other callers have said into a much closer perspective for choreographic control. What I was looking at, the four ladies chain effect being called a technical zero, it seems to me that if you look at it more as a fractional zero or do a double, that effect, the four ladies chain effect, is a fractional zero, is an easier way for me to relate to it rather than saying four ladies chain is a technical zero. You know, like an invert and rotate is a technical zero, whereas a four ladies chain is a fractional zero. That's just a matter of perception. But having that choreographic control, what you've given is not only an entrance, but an exit to that effect, which means that I can set up much more vivid and much more alive choreography to move back and forth on the grid both ways with control by knowing I'm setting up a fractional effect, and I can do a four ladies chain at any time or a four ladies chain effect movement like a spin chain through, and still have control of my choreography all the way. And that is a very, very powerful tool for flexibility as a caller. So excellent presentation.
Yes, well said.
But just to ask Mel, isn't all technical zeros also a fractional zero or half a zero?
Yeah, it is. It's just, it was one of those questions that it came up an awful lot in the GSIs as well as in my sessions as well. When we talk about zeros, there's true zeros, there's geographic zeros, there's technical zeros, there's fractional zeros. Anything that's not a true is a technical zero. It's just a matter of what the application of it is. In this case, it's a four ladies chain effect, or a do it double zero, or a fractional zero. And in this case, it's a little easier for me to clarify in my mind. The ladies chain effect, or the four ladies chain effect, is a fractional zero. But it's like the movement right and left through. I can put it in the beginning, I can put it in the middle, I can put it at the end, and still have choreographic control as long as I know where I'm using it. For a modular caller, which I do a lot of module calling, moving around, I could throw that effect in at the beginning, do a module, do a flip-flop, do a module, throw in the other lady's chain effect, or move that around anywhere. And I've got control as long as I keep in my mind, I have to add that lady's chain effect or take it away, which is really, really a powerful calling tool.
What I missed a bit was the fact that you can actually do it the other way around as well. You can use the four lady chain effect or use those technical zeros to actually get a zero where you didn't expect to get them. I mean, all eight circle it is a zero. So if you have a zero box, slide through, pass the ocean, girls trade, all eight circle it, I can do a recycle and still have a zero box without even mentioning. Or heads lead right, pass through, trade by, I still have a lead right box because
Absolutely. And that is why I said we only have, not to defend myself, but we have only 1 hour. That's why I decided let's go zero box and spin chain through box, and not lead right box and the lead right box version of a four ladies chain lead right box. Yeah, this would be the next. I introduced the zero line and the zero line four ladies chain. And that is how I want to give some practical use, but you're absolutely right. You can do it the reverse way. And let me answer one, because I studied technical zeros really intense. There's something always I've heard change inside and outside, and that is not true. Because if you it is true, and it only makes sense to use technical zeros in your daily calling if you use it from the normal arrangements and half arrangements. The others have no effect because there are technical zeros if you have, for example, the boys in the center and the girls on the outside. And I can, let's say, extend, swing your partner promenade type of situation. But if I call a technical zero, I can call extend, swing, and it will be your right-hand lady. But it does not change inside and outside because the boys are still in the center. So to have this flip-flop effect and moving the dancers around, that is only useful in this 0 and half arrangements, and where the sequence then comes in, and that's the part, because there is a technical zero from all 6 arrangements, and then the groups are different. It's only in 3 groups. But that is then the technical zero discussion, which can get very complicated. And this is exactly what I try to avoid in giving examples and practical examples. And when this sticks in your head, I think you have something in your toolbox that you can also use and actively use.
If you are somebody that really wants to dig down deeply into technical zeros, maybe I don't know on the practical point, but just understanding them, check out things that Kip Garvey has done. He has really torn it apart.
Yes.
And I think some places to look forward to, or I think he's been on Mel's sessions where he's talked about technical zeros and some real deep stuff. If you want a lighter version of technical zeros, let me mention, if you've taken my class or mental image, or if you've just do mental image on your own somehow, or read my book or what have you, I look at the very superficial way of looking at technical zeros. I generally say that some people seem to know you can memorize zeros and they work. You can memorize technical zeros and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And so people say, I'm not going to use them because sometimes they won't. If you're a mental image caller, if all X's are canceled, then technical zeros work. And if there's an uncanceled X, technical zeros don't work. Taking it a step towards what Lorenz said, they don't work, they cause a 4 ladies chain effect. The other thing is there's a special category of technical zeros that only work if there's an uncanceled X and you cancel it afterwards. One of those is ping pong circulate. One is all 8 circulate. You guys mentioned that before. So it doesn't only take and you guys are saying the ladies chain effect, that's what Jay King used to call it. I'm calling them X's for exchanging partners. Lorenz, you've added some interesting things to my thought on what work, technical zeros that need a ladies chain kind of thing is the pass-through trade buy and the double pass-through cloverleaf, and I've got to experiment with that more. You're making me think. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's a brief discussion on that end of it. Any other thoughts and comments?
I was just going to add, Don, that what Gugu was talking about, the lead to the right box using this effect and the application of it. I can see Lorenz session 2 and then Lorenz session 3 expanding the idea further into the technical. I'm just putting that out there because I find it an absolutely fascinating topic. I've used the ladies chain effect in my calling, but in all honesty, I never really put it into a practical look of understanding it the way you've presented it. And that makes it a hell of a lot clearer for me to try and explain the concept as well. I'm going to recommend this video to everybody. So thank you very much.
I want to repeat what Lorenz has said at least twice and maybe 3 times, that he's given us one little aspect of it or using it from one set of formations that allows it to be allows us to understand it and practically use it and integrate it into our calling that way, and that there's much more expansion to that. I don't know if, Lorenz, if you did another one on a different formation, would it be built on this one? Or, I mean, would I have to tell people, go back and read this before you or see this? Or would you just start from scratch with a different formation rather than the spin chain through box?
Yeah, good question. I think this is the basis, because I wanted to also align, if you teach something new, I think it's a good idea to start where people can relate to first and then expand. And I try to nod it towards the chicken plucker path, right? Station 1, station 2, or whatever the terminology is, then station 2 plus a right and left through. That is our spin chain through box, and then comes into pass to trade by, the different 8 ways of presenting a zero box. That is how I thought is an idea that everybody can follow along. The next thing would be something in between, which is around the outside. Because if I go from this box and I say split star through pass to bend the line, it's a type of working around the outside. I would expand on that. And then later on adding what has been mentioned, the lead to the right box. And you know what? At the end, if you look at all this, this is where becomes what cramps is. This is exactly what cramps is all about, is knowing all the 16 or whatever arrangement, sequence, relationships there exists for one formation, but going there effectively and go from one to another to the other. And before cramps, Kip and myself, we called that marker setups before the word cramps was invented. We named this marker setups and referred then with up rolling and down rolling dancers, which is then Kip's terminology. And I learned all the technical zeros from Kip many years ago, where we had a lot of beers at Collar Lab and discuss how we present this. But thank you, Mel, for your comment, because I think we need to take the complexity out, also to give beginner callers a way into this idea, and following the path along. But I will discuss with friends and callers, and then come back to you, Don, if we want to go further. Thank you all. Thanks.
I personally think that the best way of looking at it is, I've been to a lot of sessions where they discuss similar techniques, but as many new callers say, it's like being fed with a fire hose. And it's really good to have a baseline step by step by step. Like if we look as in introduction to modules, you'll get 8 or 9 hours of training crammed into 40 minutes of presentation, as opposed to what you're presenting is, here's a bite, take it home, chew on it for a while so you can digest it. Now come back for the second bite of the cake. And that is a format that I really, really like, especially for new callers. So thank you very much.
That's been my concern about crams, is that they cram too much at you, that you really have to memorize this and that and this, and it's just tons of expanded module or learning kind of thing. So this, as Mel said, breaking it down to just one spoonful of cake at a time, I think hopefully has been helpful to many of you out there. I still can't remember much about your your presentation at Al's school about sequence, but I remember going into it thinking, yeah, they're either in sequence or not. They're not, and all of a sudden you were blowing me away with some really interesting ways to look at that. So
yeah, even Don, you have all these nice words for me, but this seminar within the corner school was way too complicated, and it took me these 30 years of experience in calling to come up with this kind of seminar. That's what makes technically square dancing so enjoyable for me. Is really this fact, and square dance has so many things to offer. Of course, I like the choreographic stuff a lot, the technical stuff, but it can be very complicated. But now finding things together to present it in an easier and digestible way is what I want to do in the next years.
So you said you're going to do one on showmanship for us? No. Mickey, you got your hand
I
up.
let Deborah do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a great presentation, Lorenz. Thank you. And with the get out on either getting to the partner or on the third hand, I just got inspired that when using at the beginning, not a four ladies chain, but a four ladies chain 3/4, with the system, we easily could get on working on the second hand. We do an allemand left, go forward 2 into a do paso, or on the fourth hand actions with just adding one simple call and then using your system. I think this is a great tool.
So I'm curious, is there anybody that's with us now whose head is totally spinning and saying, what did he say?
I'm gonna
It's
guess
not-
that that's pretty much most of the callers who are any newer at this than I am, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
You know, so I'm surprisingly, it's not spinning. This actually sort of makes sense. I mean, I'll have to go back and look at it and you know, memorize and write down all the sequences and stuff, but it's logical.
Good. That's great to hear, Yolanda.
So
because-
for me, that's something. Actually, I've been waiting for this, like I call it station 3. Like it's like, okay, we've done corner boxes, what you call 0 boxes, right? And we've done right in hand ladies box, but we never really do what I call station 3. And I thought, okay, how long do I have to wait before we start talking about that, right? So it's like, oh, okay, finally.
We had, what I liked about it and what you're saying, Yolanda, is very much, Bob Ellen gave a presentation. He was talking about the chicken plucker effect that was going on, but he doesn't like the right and left. He likes to keep them in sequence. And it's you know, instead of doing the right and left through the pass through trade by keeping them in sequence and working them that way. This builds right into that because the setup is exactly the same. And it was a comment that was made by, I think, three of the newer callers in that session. It really made sense to keep that sequence. So you've got a 0 box with a ladies chain effect. This is getting them to that point differently. But those sessions started looking at the point. What you've done is you simplified it to getting to that point and then understanding where that fixed point of that 0 box or the ladies chain effect or the spin chain through box, how you get there and how you can apply that, which is really taking to the next step of gelling. And for a lot of newer callers, what they've said in a number of these sessions and in the GSI sessions as well is understanding the sequence. Everything's focused on the sequence. Yours is focused on the sequence, but it's the sequence is a taken for granted. You're setting this up because you understand the ladies' effects, so don't worry about the rest of it. Keep it nice and simple. Here's the flows to add the toolbox. Here's the screwdriver, here's the hammer, here's the nails. Next session, we're going to show you how to use the drill. And that's what I really liked about it. And I think that's along the lines of what you were saying with Bob's, and this is just the next step, Yolanda.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that all the guys move around more as well, right? The ladies are always moving around, but in this manner, the guys will be moving around the quadrants more as well. At least that's my take on it anyway.
One point I was going to make is this is a nice thing to add to the toolbox, you know, our knowledge toolbox. But many times when we're calling, we can have strategies that don't involve you know, moving, you know, in a technical sense from here to there or whatever. But we can do something like, you know, in this tip, I'm gonna make sure that every guy in the square dances with every girl, and I'm gonna move around that way. Or you can move people to different quadrants. You know, you can have different goals when you're doing your patter to move the dancers around. But I agree that this, you know, I enjoyed this presentation because it's a interesting technical point to know that's in the background. But I tend to not call with technical ideas in mind, with exception as I never use the standard corner box. I use the box on the other side because I like to be able to Alaman left and right and left grand to home, or just a right and left grand to home. So I tend to work on the other side of the square, even though that's not a particularly important point. But the biggest point is to get dancers dancing with each other in a quick way. So the dancers, not all the guys are not always with the same two girls, but the guys, are dancing with everyone in the square.
I have a question, probably more so for the newer callers that have been dancers for a long time, but there seems to be a lot in the last many years, something that I never thought of as a caller, and I don't think I thought of as a dancer, and I first became aware of it in listening to Jerry's story, but there's a lot of effort to get dancers to move to different parts of the square, to not just dance around where they are, and to dance with different partners. Of course, Larry, I initially think, well, I do a singing call. They get to dance with different people. I don't remember as a dancer worrying about whether I'm in this quadrant or that quadrant, or where on the floor, or what wall I'm looking at. I do remember getting a feeling of what formation we're in, waves, two-face lines, double pass-through, and where I am in that formation. But what I mostly remember is just the pleasure of moving from one person to the next, from one arm to the next. So I'm curious, do dancers really notice what we're now trying to do? I think it's a great idea, but I never thought of it as a dancer. So do dancers really care about where they are physically in the square and the variety of that?
If my answer would be yes. I really didn't mind so much what the formations were, but I found it boring to be stuck in the same quadrant all the time. So I like being moved around. It's sort of like line dancing where you have different walls to look at, right? So from different dancing perspective.
I think there are, standing ovations, or instant clapping when you do a surprising get out. And there are dancers, when they're driving home, they will not remember why they clapped. They had all the good time, but why they clapped about this special get out or something like this. But people driving home and say, hey, this was a good dance, and they cannot tell you why it was a good dance. They just had the feeling it was a good dance. And I think this is what Larry said, is dancing in different quadrants, dancing with all the ladies and with all the boys. I think it's not instant clapping, they don't understand, but people feel it when they're dancing in the groups of 8 with this dynamic that exists. And I've learned it more from Martin again, who said, this is what makes it, I can dance alone and feel good by myself, but dancing with 8 people, it gets a certain dynamic, and we all have experienced this, right? If we're really in there. And when people driving home and saying, this was a great dance, but I don't know why. And I think this adds to it.
Yeah, I don't know that when I was just dancing, I had the language to be able to describe why it felt weird to only be in one quadrant. But once I started learning to call, I became super aware of it and was like, oh, this is why I feel uncomfortable now.
I think you hit the nail on the head right at the beginning when you said dancers don't always recognize the 4 people or dancing with the same people, but they do recognize the familiarity of a specific point on the floor that they're always dancing in, that little group. And as Yolanda was saying, it's mainly the men will stay in that group and you move the ladies around. Changing the aspect, side walls to head walls, does a little bit of that, but moving with the same group of people in that left-hand side or opposite is usually where most callers stay. That's the comfort zone for ease of recognition. This gives you flexibility without having to recognize, because you're controlling where you're putting the setup just by remembering, ladies are chained. Doesn't really matter what I call. I'll flip them over to the other side. I'll do an 8 chain 4. I'll do whatever. I don't have to worry about that. I know I'm in whatever place I'm at. And then controlling it later on to add the right and left grand on the third hand, or the Alaman left and promenade, you've got the 3/4 or the half promenade. That's a bonus that's added on to the system. Moving them around the floor, I think, is the bigger part of the benefit of this, what you're presenting.
I think that's one of the reasons I decided to learn both positions, because just doing one position became too predictable for me. And seeing this presentation is like, okay, we can move people around more.
I can see something interesting here. When we talk about teaching dancers, we talk about different dancers learn different ways, and if they don't get it, if some of the dancers don't get what you've just said, obviously you don't say it louder, you say it a different way, and some are tactile and some are visual, etc. I think that's the same with their dancing experience, and probably that's why Yolanda and I have a different feeling. She knows where she is on the square, and I just know whether I'm moving with the music. We
Yeah.
as
Like
as
much
people,
more I'm much more of a kinesthetic learner, and I learned how to dance in the 80s, took 30 years off and went right back on the floor. No problem. And so, but I didn't have to think about what formation I was in. I just heard the music, heard the calls, and went for it again. Right? Because
and
I
my
remembered the feel of the calls. I didn't memorize them. We're in this formation, that formation. I memorized them by motor muscle memory.
I said, when people talk about difficulty, especially when you drift from standard formations and standard arrangements and combinations and move just a little bit more to all position stuff, the thing that will help the dancer most is them being aware of formations. When instead of just working on one side, all of a sudden, head square through, swing through, boys run, all of a sudden I do a hinge and the new centers trade, and you got the left side working with the right side. Dancers being aware of that formation helps them become better dancers. Um, it's a fun.
I think things like which are simple calls for us, like a pass through or bend a line or a clover leaf. For the callers, they're simple calls. As a dancer, they make a difference. They totally change how they are moving the square.
I guess the average dancer can rely to whether they've had a good body flow or not, but not exactly whether they've danced with all the other dancers in their square. Mostly, as I see it, and they're happy if they don't break their bones, because we are doing some funny things which they don't expect, because it's not what they're used to be dancing.
Yeah.
So as soon as you start calling something unexpected or from an unusual formation, which they're not used to go through every week and every evening they dance, all for a sudden it's oh, you can't do that. Yes, you can. And so they claim it as bad body flow, but because they have to think. So I guess mainly they do remember whether they can just float through the dancing or whether they've got stop and go. I don't think that most dancers really do realize that whether they've been dancing with all of their dancing partners in the square or in all quadrants. They might realize, oh, I'm stuck here in this spot and feel uncomfortable, but I don't think they realize that whether they've been dancing with all the others.
I think
might be wrong.
Claudia, you're feeling sort of similar to me. Is am I moving in different ways, but I don't care what part of the square with whom. As they say, we all learn differently. I want to quote one of my mentors, Jim Mayo. People used to say, dancers, oh, we like to be challenged. And Jim said, when he teaching callers, including myself, people like to be challenged but win, which to me means they really don't want to be challenged. They just want variety and think they're being challenged. And that's what we're talking about here, is giving them variety, but still letting them win.
And challenge is a very individual thing.
It's a very fine line, yes.
Yeah, one interesting way you can look at this is, I've thought about this, quite a bit. But one thing I I experimented with is what I call hiding the quarter. And so I call a full tip, and I literally hide the corner from everyone until the very end. And they seem to, think the get out was a little better, for some reason. I don't know. It's tricky business. We don't like interview the dancers after a tip. Hello, dancer A, what did you think about this tip? So all we can perceive is the reception or the excitement and the dancer, enthusiasm. So yeah, it's a non-exact science for sure.
I like that idea of hiding the corner, Larry. I've always said that, it's sort of a kaleidoscope of things, and what amazes the dancers, I know it amazed me when I started getting into this, is when you sort of randomly, continuously mix everybody up, what's the surprise and the miracle of untangling them? And if you're just hovering around your corner all the time, do-si-do, then swing through and boys trade, and you're right back with her, hinge, scoot back, you're right back with her. I like the idea of hiding the corner. Martin, what have you got to add?
Larry, you just said we don't interview the dancers. We have a small card here, and that's a group of 5 callers, and we have like a feedback option for dancers. It's all in German, so you can't read it anyway. But we ask them, how did you like the choreo? How was the pronunciation? How did you enjoy the music? And all those things, because we realize, or we think, that we as callers tend to kind of know everything. How do we know whether dancers like what we are doing or they don't? I mean, of course they're coming back, of course they're clapping the hands and all that, but why not ask the dancers? That's my first thought. And we are trying to ask the dancers. And before that, I had a questionnaire to my club that I handed out, and I got some feedback. And of course, it was very nice, but not all of it. And that made me change a few things and adapt it. My second thought on this is, I cannot thank Dan, Mel, and everybody working on this Zoom sessions enough for all the material you put out there. I mean, this is such a rich knowledge base that you can dive into and learn how to call, but learn it in a technical way. I mean, we are talking about zeros, we're talking about how that thing works and all that, but at the end, it's a dance. And when Larry says, I get the most success by not calling from a corner box, but using another box. And Yolanda says, I'm a kinesthetic learner, and we work through was heißt ein Diplomarbeit, a doctorate degree, what you write a paper for a doctorate degree?
Thesis.
A thesis, yeah. And we found out that the main thing that makes dancers enjoy square dancing is that they have a synchronized joy with the other 7. I mean, if you look at the Zoom dances, where one dancer is at home, he can do perfect choreography, but it's just him or her. As soon as you have 2 dancers there, that doubles the fun. And if you have 8, that's what square dance is. You feel that the other dancer had a success as well. So when you are in that corner box, I don't think that you remember the 4 dancers, but you do remember that spot you're on. I mean, you can easily call a spin the top from parallel ocean waves and then call it from a tidal wave. It does feel different to the dancers, but they enjoy that they can do the task, complete the task with the other 7. And I understood, I mean, I heard Lorenz's talk before, and my brain is way different than Lorenz's brain. I'm not as analytic as him. And I was sitting in there and I said, Lorenz, what the hell? Why do I have to know all that? And so we spent some time talking about it. And yes, if you are starting to call with a purpose, if you want the dancers to experience a kind of movement, a spot, a quadrant, whatever, you need to know how to get there. And that's how I understood his presentation. This is a Google map for callers to bring dancers to a certain position and to bring them back home again. So I really enjoyed the talk, Lorenz.
I was
Navigator for square dancing. I like that.
I was just looking at my spreadsheet. This is our 70th session, which it blows my mind. And in talking a few days ago to somebody that I hope will be a presenter for us soon, and I sent him a copy of the spreadsheet, and he said, wow, you've had lots of presenters and covered lots of topics. What a wide variety. Amazing. And I'm hoping he will add to that too. Thank you, Martin, for positive feedback, because it helps energize Dan and me to keep going with this stuff. It's been quite a ride, guys.
And Don, I think your sessions are here in Germany. They start at 5:00 p.m. So that's easy to do. But Mel's sessions start at 11 and they last until 1 or 2 at night. And many people attend that. But there are more, I guess, there are more people watching it afterwards on YouTube.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure you have a vast or a big crowd watching all this. So thank you very much.
When I first started setting these up, I was trying to figure out a time that would be good around the world. It was quite a project. So 11 o'clock our time means 8 o'clock West Coast, 8 in the morning for Western US and Canada. It's which for me is much too early, but is considered a reasonable time. It put it in late afternoon in Europe, where you are, Martin. And we did have quite a few Australian and Japanese joining originally. And my mental image classes, we actually did one instead of the 11 o'clock. I did at 8 o'clock here so that they could have a more reasonable in the evening. I'm learning about interesting how square dancing is around the world kind of thing, how the world is different in different parts. Time zones vary and what have you. It's been fun and educational in that respect also. Very interesting. And yes, I haven't checked lately, but Dan could probably give us a feel for how many people have gone back and watched the videos because they couldn't be.
I haven't been back to check counts recently, except, I mean, occasionally I go back in that Tony Parks one that has hundreds of watches. But probably because the Square Dance History mention. But actually, one of the things I've been thinking about for this and for another Zoom session is would anybody be interested in these presented as podcast form? And of course, asking this to the people who actually show up on the Saturday morning is different, but I could, set up a podcast feed, and for not too many bucks a month, find a way to push these all off into MP3s somewhere and probably figure that out. So Martin, if that's a hand up, then maybe I should figure out how to do that.
Dan, are you talking about converting these to a podcast or having a separate podcast? That I know there's some people that don't like just constant presentation, but enjoy the interaction of our people working together, and being able to ask questions and what have you. And as much as I'd love to have a larger group like Mel has, this is a good sized group for throwing ideas back and forth. But what are your thoughts on that?
I was thinking there is some visual aspect here, but I was just thinking about taking the audio portions of this track and publishing that in a podcast feed.
Okay, so not just putting it in a different place for people to listen to.
Yeah, and
gotcha.
in my the other Zoom session I host, there's often more in the way of slides, although there's stuff here, and trying to figure out how to adapt the format so that it is a little bit more audio strong. So, but I don't necessarily think we want to do that here because this is a much smaller audience than the other one. So,
I think it's ironic because I talk to presenters and say, I want you to talk about something you're passionate about, that you want to share, and try to keep it as informal as possible. We don't need slides. And yet most of the ones I've done have used slides. So
Yeah.
I feel guilty. Martin, go ahead.
Just an idea, but I don't know if the English word is correct. Would a curator be a good thing? So if you take all the videos and you just put them on YouTube, they are in an order of appearance, but they have a content order. And if that's worked out, that would help that would help everybody to find the talks related to one another.
One of the things that I know I need to do is to take Don's thing. So all of these files that are sitting on my computers, or one of my computer, hopefully still somewhere, have a GMT and then a date file format. So I need to go back into my YouTube, copy all of the descriptions and things out, and match those back up, and then link to them from my square dancing website, which is alamandleft.com, and try to put a little bit of that curation into it. If you have suggestions for how that should go, or you'd like to assist with that, once I get the first part of that done, more people, more eyes, more opinions is almost always good.
I'm not sure exactly what you said, Dan, or Martin, but what I'm thinking is, I know when you post something on YouTube, there's a brief description underneath it. If you could create that description that tells pretty much what's going on more than just the title of it, and make that searchable, or make an index of that, so that the newer caller, or the caller that wanted to look up something on showmanship, could say, oh, there are 3, let me go click on this and go right to those 3 and see the different opinions on showmanship. Or there's another one on modules, or another 5 on modules, let's go look at that. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, Martin?
Well, we have different visitors to that site, and if you say someone can type in showmanship, the one who's typing that in needs to know what showmanship is and what he's looking for. Is that the right word for what he's looking for? Is module the right word he's looking for? If you're talking about across the street box and all those names, I think that these are pretty sophisticated words. And if you are a newbie session, how does the newbie know where to look for?
Wow, that brings up a session that we did 3, 4, 5 sessions in, where Dan did a session saying, I was a newbie and now I'm just over the threshold and I understand what 0 box means and all this other stuff. And he started talking about the bridge between the person you're talking about, Martin, that doesn't understand the terminology we all know, and what a bridge that is to it. And that interestingly got into talking about callers schools from accredited caller coaches, that they use this terminology and they really should be explaining it first. And we had caller coaches on, but yeah, does that bring back memories, Dan?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that as we were doing this session, and how a year and a half ago I would have been completely lost.
Oh,
I
totally.
appreciate Yolanda's saying that she could follow it, but yeah, it's.
I'm wondering if we
I
should
have to
repeat a
leave.
session. I'm wondering if we should repeat a session like that.
Thank you very much, Lawrence.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Lawrence.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Hi, Lawrence.
One of the things that comes up, Dan, that you're saying, both Dan and Mark Hart look after the technical side of a lot of these, and Dan's got a lot of these out and available. Mark posts all of your sessions, Don, with Dan, as well as links to the GSIs and all of mine on the Orange County Callers website. One of the values that's different between a podcast, which is listen and absorb, and you'd have to, of course, modify it for the explanation of the visual aspects of the slides, is the fact that there are, well, we've had that at least 3, and I've recommended 2 of your sessions, Don, as well, off the OC Callers website. There are groups of callers that get together, and in some cases there's one callers association that gets together, and they actually pull these videos down, they download the things, they download the formats, they download the PowerPoint presentations, and they become training sessions for those callers or for those callers associations to do that kind of activity. They are a really, really good resource. I've also recommended the Caller Lab knowledge base for exactly the same thing, because there's a lot of callers out there that are tasked to do a presentation at their callers association, or they want to cover a topic, or they want to cover something at Caller Lab, of course, and it's been done 100 times. And they always feel real harsh to themselves about having to present to another group of callers, especially experienced callers. Whereas a lot of these sessions are geared not so much for the passage of the information, but they're structured in a way that a new caller will learn from the information, an experienced caller will expand their knowledge, and a very experienced caller will find a way of mentoring new callers that is always left out of the teaching curriculum, if you will, is that's how to teach the teachers to teach. And this is where I find the value in your sessions, and how I try to structure mine as well, so that you hit all 3 tiers of instructional level. And that's where the value in, as you say, the slides, the presentation, but more often than not, the post-presentation interaction and discussion leading to the next session come in handy. So don't, if there is a way of collating these and putting them on a searchable database, I don't know what it is, but there's obviously, somebody with more technical knowledge than I have, it should be able to do it.
That would be awesome, because as a new caller myself, I'm understanding this, but I actually realize I am not at the calling level to be using this yet. And when I get there, I want to have the resource to go back to work on it.
Oh no!
I look at this like a library, right? So
Yeah.
I'm being exposed to the content. Don't necessarily need to use it today, but when I need it, I will have it in the back of my head and go, oh, okay, I need to go look for this or that, right? And that's one of the reasons I'm doing some of the recording as well, because what I'm doing now is I'm putting some things that go together on the same stick, and then I go back and look at it. The scary part is that, just like when I was in Don's group last year, and Mel will push me every once in a while. Last week, I had a homework assignment. I was supposed to set up something really difficult so that an experienced caller could resolve it, but we were supposed to make them as difficult as possible. So I ended up with same sex, and and that they were not normal and stuff like that. And it was like, okay, first of all, I couldn't have done that last year, right? And then we were in the group. Somehow, instead of the experienced caller resolving it, we were suggested that we would try and resolve it ourselves, and I actually pulled it off. It's like, and I was also told, some days you can do it better than other days. Like, don't have this expectation that every time you're going to have the same level of, but on those days when it works, it's really fun.
You did very well that day too.
One of the amazing things that I see coming out of a lot of these sessions, like Yolanda, it was about 3 years ago, I think, that we got together for the first time, and we weren't recording these sessions on Zoom at all at that particular point. They just come from exercises in the Newbie Callers page on Facebook that led to sessions, and we only started recording just a couple of years ago, around the same time you did, Don. And I think there's you've got 70 sessions now. We've got about 80 some odd sessions. GSI has about 50 sessions. Those are all in a couple of places in one location, all those sessions. But what is really good is I look at, somebody like you, Yolanda. I remember what you were like. Like for all of you in this session, Yolanda has a very powerful, straightforward voice. And she is very good at speaking her mind. 3 years ago, Yolanda would hide behind the couch and you'd see a pair of eyeballs looking over the corner just to see so nobody would actually look at her as far as calling goes. And that is a remarkable thing to see with a new caller that is coming out and looking at these things, to the fact that I think, Yolanda, now you're getting together and actually hosting or coordinating sessions with other new callers just on Zoom, or you were doing that for a while, just new callers getting in, they pull one of these sessions out, look at it, and then explore that aspect, which is absolutely fantastic. Don, I don't know how many people I've recommended taking your mental image class, pushing that they've come to me and they've started asking me questions about it. And of course, my answer is, yes, well, here, buy this book, because I have no idea.
Mel, why don't you take the class sometime?
I have been trying to. I just got a new job with the EPA, and that has been going. And then I do this session, and I have very, very little in the way of time right now. So.
I remember when I finished my first caller school, I was thinking to myself, boy, if I ever learn how to do all the things I know how to do, in other words, I've learned about them, but sure can't exercise them, I might become a decent caller. There was the fire hose effect, and I had collected all that water. I just didn't quite digest it yet. But at least I was able to understand it as we went through it. Somebody mentioned just recently the knowledge base, the Caller Lab knowledge base. We did have Barry Clasper, who's the backbone of that, on presenting it early on, and you could go back and look at the video. But I've got to say, I'm kind of disappointed in it. It's got lots and lots of stuff, but I find it very difficult to find what I'm looking for in it.
Yes. A lot of the new callers have said the same thing to me. We don't access it as the new callers should be using it the most, but we don't know how to use it well enough, and it takes too much time. So we tend to go and find one of these sessions.
I find it's designed for somebody that has a really good technical knowledge of how to use a technical knowledge base, as opposed to somebody that just wants to find something on a general topic. I've got the same frustration with it.
We have online our Score Dance caller community, 4, 5, 6 huge knowledge bases of different sorts, or what have you, reference places. And I know, depending on what I need, I know where to go and find them. Well, I'm not always know where, but I'll eventually come up with them. And maybe we should have a session on outlining the pros and cons of each. There's the knowledge base. There's Vic Cedar's site. There's
Rich Reel's site.
Rich Reels, which I never go to. And Clark has a lot of stuff, but I'm thinking of things like the Square Dance Foundation of New England has a lot of stuff on it. The Square Dance History Project. There's an archive project. The Square Dance History Project that's mostly David Millstone, Jim Mayo, and Tony Parks have been putting stuff there. David Millstone, I noticed on the video, actually joined us last week, or joined you. I wasn't around, and he's probably going to be doing a session for us sometime soon. But maybe if we discuss the pros and cons or what's available on each of these, it would be great. I was talking to my class, and somebody, I mentioned note services. One of the sites out there has most of the note services that used to exist scanned in with permission, and there's tons and tons and tons of stuff available. I thought it was the
New England site.
What?
That's the New England site.
It's the New England site. Yeah, I finally found that, and I sent out a link to the guys. I've also copied down all the choreo breakdowns that I wrote, and I've OCR'd them or I'm in the process of, so I can tabulate some of the stuff in there, which is kind of cool. there's amazing resources, and read some of the things that I wrote 30, 40 years ago, and they still apply. But as Mike was saying last year about Bob Osgood saying that the costumes are going to evolve, I always used to say this is a folk activity, and folk activities evolve, and adding new calls was because it evolved in that way, etc. I saw a hand go up, and then my screen switched around. Don't recall. I know, Martin, you had one up, but I think somebody else did too. Martin, go for it.
These sessions are for newer callers, for newbies, but there's a gap between the dancer and the new caller. And that gap needs to be closed in order to get more callers to spread the square dance activity. And times are changing. I mean, when I look at my 16-year-old daughter or at my 18-year-old boy, the way they use a computer is completely different from what I do. And they use YouTube. I remember standing in the workshop with my little son, 6 or 7 years old. He was doing something. I said, well, who taught you this? And he said, Dad, I saw it on YouTube. So what you do with these sessions is you transfer all the knowledge we have into the modern world. Now people can look it up online, and that will attract maybe younger people, but that will make it easier. But still, coming from zero, from being an interested dancer to the point where I want to search for those topics, that's what I wanted to say with my curation, that maybe we can, whoever can, put it in a form that those who are not familiar with all the words we're using to get an approach. I mean, this will never, ever replace a caller school, in my opinion, because there's a difference between looking at a YouTube video and being in person in front of somebody teaching me something. But still, this is a very, very important source of information. And if you call it a newbie session, maybe we can expand that to that. I call it a gap. How do we get dancers to call?
That's an interesting thought of, you're right. People are talking about we need more callers to help generate more activity, and wonder what would happen if we had a session or 2 or 3 specifically advertised on dancer groups, saying, if you have any thoughts of becoming a caller, we're going to get together and talk about what it takes, what the different ingredients are, and how to go about it, and what have you. It might be an interesting way to
but in an open house way.
Yeah.
Not in a not the way that you tell them it's time consuming, expensive, and people will talk about you in a bad way. Not that.
Oh,
what you're saying is save the truth for later, right?
Right.
That's yeah. I was thinking of telling them how difficult and all the stuff they have to know. You're trying to think of how much fun we can have, and there are only a few things to learn.
Take your paycheck to the next dance, hold it in your hand, call the tip, and then feel the applause and the paycheck. And it's the applause that will stay with you.
I just remember doing my first singing call in front of a group, and my God, the feeling of power. I say jump, and they jump. And being
Yours was power, Don. Mine was abject terror.
Well, there was power and a great feeling, and an amazement that they didn't do it the instant I thought of it. They had a 2-second delay before responding. I didn't get that either, the timing leading thing. But it took 3, 4, 8 years, I don't know, before driving home in the car, I could relate to that guy that had been on stage. I mean, me, a shy little guy, was was not the guy that was up in front of people and acting like he knew what he was doing and directing them. That there were two different people in there, and it took a long time to merge that.
I've talked to a number of new callers in the last couple of years, and most of us have concurred that it's lucky that we had no concept of what we were getting into besides doing a singing call, because most of us said if we had known how time consuming it was and how much there is to learn, we probably would have been way too overwhelmed to start at all. You know.
I think that's actually one of the biggest mistakes that people mentoring new callers make is here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to know. It was the same as the 1980s was you don't need to know all this stuff. All you need to do is know how to resolve a square, and suddenly, oh yeah, I can resolve a square, but I have no idea how to move a square. And well, you need to know this, you need to know this, you need to know this. And all of that was, to use the phrase that's already been used, crammed down their throats after the fact without a foundation to lay, to lay all the bits and pieces out on the table. There was no table there, it was just thrown on the floor. It's a fascinating aspect. We had Eddie Powell talk about that. He wrote the book, So You Want to Be a Caller, to talk about that in one of that sessions. But I think that is an excellent thing to explore, Martin. Fantastic idea.
I can see a fun session we could have here before opening it to square dancers is just brainstorming what to tell them and what not to tell them. And just have a session among us like we're bordering on right now. I'll bet you we could get into an awful lot of stuff.
I think the wording is very important. I look at Mickey's camera at the moment. We used to have we have a caller meeting on a regular basis. And I remember him doing a session. I don't remember on what, but it was something about teaching. And he just on the fly said, yeah, and then I tell my dancers, look for your team. And on my way home, I was thinking, I never used the word team when introducing a call. And that from that moment on, that was in my portfolio. And so back to what Larry said earlier, if you refer the dancers to the new team, they're doing the next call in, and then the team changes and they're doing the next call. So it's that little word that made me very interested in what he's doing there. And if we have a list with words that make young, I mean, I call for a club where the average age is 75, so young is 60. I call for a club where the average age is 40, so young is 30. But where the young callers or the new callers get attracted to start being a caller, that would be great.
I was reminded of something when you're talking about your team, but reminded of something I was going to say earlier where people want to be challenged, but really they just want variety. Dancers think of themselves as working as a team, the eight people working together as a team to accomplish, so everybody gets to corner. And I think what sometimes they forget and we forget, there's really 9 people working together. You as a caller are part of that team. You're trying to make sure that they have success in enjoyment.
It's gone though in today's age from team building and working as a team or group sports to identifying the weakest link, and that's an unfortunate mentality in the team. The team on the floor of square dancing is there's a lot of who's to blame rather than, oh, that was interesting, let's try that again. There's been a fundamental shift in that philosophy for the dancers across the board in a lot of spots. My last comment was as far as relative age that you meant, Martin. My wife said to me the other day, she was at work and said, well, there was this older, one of the very older guys come up to the store to get ask for help. And he must have been, 60 or so. And I just gave her the filthiest look and she turned beet red because she looked at me and I went, well, that's not what I meant. I said, no, that's what you said. So it is relative to perspective. I don't consider myself old. but apparently I am now.
I remember when I was dancing in my early 20s and mid 20s and late 20s, the average age was always older than I was. And then when and I figured I'd rather socialize with the younger people, which I did at the college clubs I danced at, and socialized with them with other activities other than dancing. But I said that the dancing was enjoyable enough despite the fact that the people were older than I was. And then I got into my 50s and they were still older than I am. Now that I'm in my 80s, I'm not so sure. we're running into younger people, but as you say, Mel, I'm not old.
Recruiting up and down. We recruit to our friends, and as we get older, they get older.
Mickey and then Clark.
Yeah, I think I have to clarify something regarding to the team, which Martin meant. It had something to do with the teaching and the type of, I call it process management. It's not just telling the dancers what to do and then working through it, but to have a step before, like take a flutter wheel, okay? Your team, what is your team? It would be your box of 4. And are there different roles you have in your team? Like we have the left-hand dancer on the reverse the flutter who is leading the action by picking up the other person. And what is the role of the other dancers? So before we start the action of walking or dancing, we have to identify our team, which we will execute the call with, and what role do we play in that team? And then we start the action. And then comes the next call. And dancers, you know, when I started, we pick it up really slow, but I think those steps are necessary to really get it into their heart so they can do it by heart when later on they get in other concepts and stuff like that. So this takes a little bit time. And I say, now what we've done will afterwards be a process in milliseconds. But if we do not work the way, then it would not work as fast as it goes, and you just be dragged around and you not be the one in charge. And you not be the one handling the thing, but being dragged around or moving around like in a washing machine. So this is a type of process management which I have added to my teaching when training the dancers. And I think this type of team is what Martin meant, not the team of dancers and clubs and callers working together. It's specified regarding the teaching and executing calls.
One of the things that we're aiming at in the long run is the dancer hears the call and their body reacts to doing it, and their mind reacts to the fun they had because they physically interacted with other people. But we've always talked about people learn in different ways, some tactical, some, and the bottom line is we've got to get them all so they work with the hear the call, respond to it, all come out the same way. If there are any questions about that, Barry Johnson did a fabulous talk on this as to how the brain works relative to these thoughts and how you take one type of learner or another and convert it to what we're doing. And if you have any questions about that, and I should go back and listen to one of the several sessions that Barry Johnson did. And Barry's got a great way of taking technical things and breaking it down so even I can understand them, presenting them in layman's terms. It's a good thing to go back and listen to on this.
Yeah, another thing I would like to add is the videos versus podcast. Now, Martin, he puts out podcasts. I don't know whether everybody knows that with Peter. And I like, they're easy listening. And when I'm on the road, or do some kind of stubborn work, I love to listen to those podcasts and gather information, get inspired, be entertained, whatever. And it's good because it's acoustic type thing. Now, when calling and we're talking whether slides or not slides, I think it's a pretty much, if we work with technical type things, it's very much visual as well. I remember when we had one of those meetings and Martin were leading them, and I was in the car and tried to follow choreo. And he said, "Aren't you driving with your car?" And say, "Yes." "And who's driving?" I said, "I am." "But can you follow the choreo?" I said, "Yeah, I'm trying hard, but sometimes I have to concentrate on the traffic, right?" But I think for beginner callers, talking about following patterns and choreo in their mind is pretty tough. So I think the visualization is a very important part to the learning and understanding. Podcast, on the other hand, I think is cool for listening. As I said, entertaining, gathering information. Yeah, so I think there is positive pro and cons for both of them. Yeah.
Clark, what were you going to add?
So we were talking about the gap between a dancer who might be interested in calling and even some of the YouTube videos that have been made on this and other series, and that there's still kind of a gap there, and maybe there's something to be done, some videos to be made that would help fill the gap and be encouraging for newer caller or new dancers who had the calling curiosity. And then we also mentioned that the 18 to 25-year-olds use computers completely different than many of us do in terms of where they get their knowledge and how they learn things. So if you wanted to learn a little bit about, I'll make it up, salsa dancing or something, you might Google some salsa dancing and you'd eventually find a video that would give you and your partner some hints, and you could try some stuff. So the challenge to think about is not how do we convert dancers into callers perhaps, or get them interested, but how do we convert non-dancers into something that's a beginning, a bit like square dancing, that they just stumble on and do on YouTube, and perhaps it catches on. I'll throw that out as a challenge.
It would be interesting sometime to hear how different people got into calling. I know some have said the second they were dancing, they figured, oh, I got to do that. And there are others like me that thought you had to be born a caller. And it wasn't until one guy in one of my clubs insisted on doing a singing call every week. And I thought, my God, if he can, so can I. So I borrowed one of the records that the club had a good collection of, and I memorized that singing call and did it. And as I said before, seeing people jump when I said jump went to my head. And then there was another evolution 2 years later about being born as being able to do patter, because I only did singing calls for 2 years. But anyway, that might be an entertaining thing, because I think all of us got into it slightly differently. But just food for thought. Martin?
The change from my point of view in Germany, in the square dance world, came when the American left Germany, most of them. So the number of Americans dancing was lower. Because it's a German habit, I don't know the exact word for it, but we always look at the problems. And we parked the Mercedes in front of the hall so everybody can see we are driving a Mercedes. And I remember that we used to dance at the Strutters, and that was, I think, 10 squares on the floor, and the Americans, we were talking, and I never ever cared about who was who, and all of a sudden, everybody was spreading apart, and there was one guy in the middle standing there. It was a dancer, and we found out that was a general. So the whole hall was all of a sudden going like this. And that's really what we are trying to get into, or what we need to get into square dance again in Germany, from my point of view, that it's only about dancing. It's only about socializing. We go there and we dance. I don't care what job you have. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care the house you live in. We're just there to dance. And that is something that has gone away in Germany.
I've
True.
been not particularly, I've been against dress codes for a long time, but I used to think how wonderful it was when we were all dressed the same and I didn't know if the guy on my left was a banker or a janitor. We do need to generalize that in some way. It's a good point.
What I'm trying to say is that if when we go out and market square dancing, we have to market the emotions that we feel. And we are in my German head, I go out there and I say, okay, this is square dance. Started 1954 Collar Lab. There was a definition, blah, 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 blah. You have to learn. You have to come every week. And everybody's turning around and says, okay, bye. That's it. But if I tell them I go there because I enjoy it, it's fun, it's a vacation, that attracts dancers. And that's what we have to put in a video if we want dancers to turn into callers. Not you have to learn this and that, but you are playing another part in the square dance world, and that's fun.
It's the obvious next step for 1 out of every 100 of us.
Well, I think it's like when I had the opportunity, well, I got nudged really nicely, to call for the provincials. And one of the dancers after said, now, was it worth taking your laptop and all your equipment and stuff with you just to call one tip? And to me, it was like, oh yeah, totally. If you could explain that feeling of having all the dancers dance for you. I had 22 squares, so it was like, and it was like, how to explain that feeling, it's, I mean, unless you've done it, there's people don't get it.
Same with square dancing. Mickey, I guess you're next.
Yeah, adding to what Martin said, I think it all happened in Germany, maybe somewhere else in the world as well, when we had the rush into the high levels. And very often this snobismus, you saw it from high level dancers. I'm talking about A and higher, that they sometimes, not in general, but there has been, I think, a correlation, and connected with that let's say difficult choreo was dragged down into the beginner levels. Yeah, that the chess playing type thing and technical and brain working did not stay up there, but it came all the way down and took away a little bit in the entry level programs, or program, if you take basic and mainstream as different programs, took away a little bit of fun part and got very technical. And I think this is one element of adding to what Martin said. And we have to get back, and it's your own task you're doing, and focus on getting back to dancing, right? And I think this is essential.
I was not bringing that topic up in order to get everybody in a bad mood. But the interesting thing for me would be your American approach to this. And that's what I find so interesting attending these sessions, when I listen to my German callers and listen to Australian callers, American callers. That's one of the main benefits that I have from those sessions.
I think the American approach regarding at least via Canada is the SSD program.
Just like with dancers, callers all are individuals and have their own reason for enjoying calling. Some people are total technicians and love the choreography and sometimes make it too difficult because they got to entertain themselves. Others just like singing. Others like the power feeling of getting people to pay attention to them and applaud them. Others think they can make a living at it, or used to, and love the money. And there's an awful lot of feeling. I was just talking to Jim Mayo, and he's really strong on the we got to get back to the sociability of it. And SSD is trying to do that, but it's still doing it by stressing the choreography we have to do. It's not getting there. And I hope to have Jim on talking about what he's passionate about. And right now, it's we need the sociability back, because that's what square dancing is, just an excuse for us to get together and have friends.
One of the unfortunate things you say about that with the SSD program is there's a new discussion happening about an advertising flyer that has come out, and it was an introduction. It was plus groups recruiting, and the criteria was must be completed the SSD, the 12-week SSD program, or basic, or the 12-week SSD program to take this class.
That'd be cool.
And that was to get plus people in, and it was the biggest fear with the SSD program is it's not being used as a program. It's being used as a stepping stone by people with established clubs to fill their coffers and to fill their clubs rather than enjoyment. The focus is still in the wrong place, unfortunately. I think a few of you have seen that.
I
conversations going on. It's a terrible thing to happen.
When we talk about,
I'll pipe in. Oh, go ahead. Is it okay for me to comment?
Let me just spit in quickly. One of the things we're talking about, different people have different objectives. When I was talking with Lorenz about doing this, he said, "God, don't have me talk about showmanship or anything like that. I'm just a technical guy," and that's why I teased him a little at the beginning about that. Larry, what were you going to say? And then Michael, Nikki?
Sure. I was going to comment on SSD. Obviously, any program we create, there's going to be some outlying things like that. So I'm not worried about that. Our goal in SSD is just for the dancers to have a grand time and the most fun they've ever had in their whole life. And we can't really control people on the outside trying to recruit them. So I'm not really worried too much about that. We have to do what we feel like we need to do to make it, successful from the dancer point of view. And, but when I see a flyer like that, I just kind of ignore it because it's the exception, not the rule. But given that, I'm sure, between conversations with dancers, especially as SSD dancers encounter mainstream dancers, there'll be comments like that. But, that's just the world we live in. Our goal is to make that SSD program standalone as much as possible. We can never control that. That's all.
Fortunate thing is you say that's the exception to the rule. I don't think it is, because there's a lot of plus groups and advanced groups that they have the multi-level dance on the one night. They're running an SSD program on the same night with no new timings. So what they've done is they've taken their two lower groups together, that's SSD and plus, and that becomes the learning night. And it has blended into one program in a lot of areas. It is an unfortunate thing, but it is the reality of that concept. A lot of other places are using SSD with massive success, and I applaud their efforts. It is really great. But unfortunately, there's still that division in the mindset, which goes along the line of what Martin was saying. There's a need to bridge that gap between callers and dancers, but also between dancing for the dancers' enjoyment, calling for the dancers' enjoyment instead of calling for the callers. And Don, you're absolutely correct. Everybody has a different approach and a different focus.
Oh, I agree that SSD is a totally different thought process, and and I can really only comment on the area that I live in, which is the Denver, Colorado area, where we have about half the clubs at SSD and about half in mainstream. So I mean, we're gonna have issues. It's a brand new program. It's just gotten started, in the last few years in the US. And so, but there's the goal, and then of course we'll measure the reality and see if we achieve it. So.
One of the beauties I've always said about square dancing is that it has an aspect for each of the people. It's got challenge dancing for those that like to really solve puzzles and memorize a lot. It's got singing call nights for those who don't. It's got contra dancing for those that don't want to go through lessons. It has something for everybody. And it's just that we got to congeal those so that we are all getting our numbers up. I think Mickey had his hand up first, and then Martin.
Yeah. Mel knows that I've predicted, and now it seems that it happened much earlier, that within the next 2 or 3 years, there's going to be a jump in a connection from SSD to Plus and going up in the other levels. If that already works out with flyers now, then SSD is being used as a entry-level program. And I think it is sad that we have the basic and mainstream program, which is existing, and now have a second entry level. And this splits up kind of the activity. And I think whatever name it is, I don't care. And whatever program we choose to be, but we should have an entry program which works worldwide and should be just fit into stone, right? And it should be there and should not be touched. What happens above, that's a different discussion, because you always can go up. And one big selling point was always, if you learn this program, you can dance everywhere in the world. Now, having basic or mainstream dancers or SSD dancers, could you expect them to dance everywhere? And to the success, second point, and I think that's great if we get people into the activity through the SSD program, that's cool. But being so much pushed and having so much honors to the SSD program now, I bet you 99% of the success done by very respectable callers would also have been reached with numbers if they just would have used the basic program and not called it basic program, but just said, we're gonna have square dance. Let's have fun. And if they only would have used the basic program, I think they would have the same success as with the SSD. So it's not really contradictory to really have one entry-level program, whatever that may be. But that's my personal opinion. And I think I'm not too far off the edge of what's really happening.
Well, we've had this conversation, Mickey, and you're right. And in a lot of cases, we had a very good 50 movement program, which was very easy to use, but it was hard for callers to use. And the SSD program, although it's a great program for dancing, was a program that was better designed for callers because it was easier for callers to have that kind of flexibility. That said, it's here, and it does have a lot of merits, and a lot of people laugh when I say that, but it was a program designed for callers to get dancers on the floor, but also for callers because it was a lot easier than actually having to work and learn how to use a basic program properly. So that's an argument that has sailed a long way back. I'm just saddened at the jump because we're going to have that when we're probably going to have a third entry program here shortly when people are arguing against the SSD, rather than all callers across the world collectively saying, you know what, yeah, we have a problem. We created this problem collectively. Let's collectively work to fix it instead of working our own niche and keeping things the way that we want them, because we're going to die in this activity and we don't want to change. So if the activity dies after I'm gone, I don't care. And that's unfortunately a prevailing mentality.
Yeah, one thing I'll comment on that is, you know, I was out of calling when this type of program was tried before with the basic program, at least in the USA. I'm told it didn't work, but I will tell you SSD was created so that clubs could have multiple classes in a year. That the main reason for it is to increase the number of dancers by having multiple classes every year. If you have an SSD club and you don't have classes over and over and over every year, then you're not running the SSD program. It's based on having, the reason it's 12 weeks is so you can have at least 2 classes in a row, hopefully 3 classes in a row. And by the time you have the second class, the idea is for the first and second class people to recruit the people for the third class. Also, whoever has to drop out, they're added to the classes. They don't have to wait a whole year to come back to square dancing. They can take a class right then. So SSD, again, I'm not worried about this recruiting thing that popped up. The only thing I'm worried about is getting all my classes done. You know, weeks and weeks and weeks of classes. We're trying. The only purpose of it is to grow the activity. It's not to do really anything else.
Hang in there, Mickey, because Martin wanted to say something. And Martin, I want to jump in with 2 questions first. One is to Mel, remind me how many hours from now Brad is going to be on?
It's 5:30 now, so 9 o'clock, so 7, 8, 9, 2.5 hours.
2.5. Okay.
6, 7,
And
8, 3.5 hours. Sorry.
3.5. And Martin, how do I find your podcast?
The podcast is called Caller Lounge. I'll put it in the chat. We have a few sessions with in English.
Well, it'll help me brush up on my German.
Okay.
So what level are they at? Are they for newbies or more experienced callers?
You mean the podcast?
Yes.
I'll first say what I wanted to say, and that will lead to why in the podcast we do not talk about choreography or anything like that. Clark mentioned that when people go online and they want to start salsa dancing, they look up something that will be labeled salsa dancing and look at it. When we go on the internet and we put in square dance, all those videos that come up, and I apologize, but I wouldn't start square dance at all looking at those videos. So in social media, in my opinion, square dance has the worst reputation. I'm sorry, I'm limited by words. I don't want to offend anybody, but this is, I think that's crazy.
A lot of evolution.
When I listen to the SSD program, and of course we did that in Germany as well, that made me think. I started calling age of 14 as well. We wanted to be on stage beside Al and Dave and all those big names. We wanted to knock them off. We had a competition. So we're all thinking about the best get outs, the craziest stuff. And I'm not doing that anymore. If I'm asked, what do you call? I call mainstream most. And when I say I teach my dancers to dance, I don't speak about body flow. I didn't speak about timing. I speak about dancing, posture, interaction, shuffle step, a dance movement. If you look at videos from the 1960s and you look at video of the 1980s, in the 60s, you have all the squares lined up, people standing straight up, dancing. I had a discussion with Michael Kellogg on Facebook, and he said, well, what you are talking about is the more artistic way of dancing. And I thought, what the hell? Is there a non-artistic way of dancing? I mean, dancing is artistic. And the easy choreography, when you listen to the podcast by Buddy Weaver, when you have Marshall Flippo calling in the 60s, how can dancers do that if their body was not anticipating what's next? And that was the art of calling, I guess, at that time. He called so the bodies were moving that direction where he wanted to have them, because he cannot have all the words needed for the dancers to go that way wouldn't fit into that song. But they were just going there because they were dancing. So we think, and that's Peter and I, Peter Höfemeyer and I, we started the podcast because we said there is so much more around calling that is worth talking about. And so when Corona hit in, we started that podcast. We have about 350 callers in Germany. And we right now, with every episode, we reach around 250 of those callers. So we are very happy when we go to some place and they say, oh, yeah, we heard that on the podcast. But we don't talk about zero modules or cross the street box or whatever boxes. We just talk about how to teach dancing. That's very, very hard. And you do that in the open house. And when you do that in the open house, you start to move dancers around with circles. I mean, you can have a ladies chain on the first night with a head ladies circle 2 halfway and back up. That's in the definition, but nobody's doing that. You can, with stars, you can move people everywhere. But that's our approach. So I understand the SSD program, I understand the classes, I understand everything, but all the discussions I hear is about the calls or the program design or whatever. It's about dancing. I mean, overflow. My last example: if you have a wife or a husband at home, get into a mini wave and do a trade, but have a pressure here on the content, and you can trade 3, 4, 5, 6 times. That's no overflow. I mean, you go to a ballroom dance and you do a waltz. That's the worst overflow you can have from a square dance perspective, and everybody enjoys it. So if you're dancing, if your ocean wave is an ocean wave, if your do-sa-do is done in 6 steps, if you teach a pass through and you say it's only 2 steps, you got to go. You have to turn your body in order to get to the other side. Then we're back to dancing, and then I assume we can put out a video that is attractive to look at. So if you want to listen to the podcast, it won't help in any way on a choreographic basis.
So I was shocked that there are 300 callers in Germany, because I would have figured there are only about 1,000 callers worldwide. But awesome that you're reaching 200 of them. That's amazing. And 100% yes on everything else. I'm calling for the first time in 8 months, I think, this afternoon, because I've got some people coming into my back deck who haven't danced for 5 or 6 years and want to be able to dance again for an event. And all of this is helping me think about how to reach and approach them.
Say that, Dan, but it was interesting, because when I started, it was about an 80-20% split between callers in America and callers in the rest of the world. Now it's pretty much on par, and I believe there's probably more callers in the rest of the world than there are in America right now. If they all got together, that's a scary thought for a lot of people that are set in the caller lab, that we're the ones that set the rules. Because if everybody became a member of Caller Lab that was a caller, that'd be quite the shift. Clark, I know I'm sorry to interject, but I've seen you raise your hand about 7 times. I'm really curious about what you want to say.
And Martin, I think you've got. Clark, where are you?
Sorry, I just heard some sound that I think may have been coming from me. I wanted to turn it off. Oh, I know. Martin clicked on my link. Yeah. So maybe 2 thoughts now. One was back when we were talking about SSD and the statement that if the good callers who are having success with SSD had just done the same thing with, say, Basic 50, they could have had the same success, that we didn't need SSD versus, this set of calls versus that set of calls. And already the good point was made that SSD is more structured to make it easier for callers to use those calls and enjoy calling. But the point I wanted to make about it, not that I know anything about SSD, is that it comes with a philosophy, and the people who have been successful and are propagating it and promoting it have also, it's not just this list of calls, it's this list of calls plus the way you think about it, the way you structure your dances, what the end goal is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what was missing between Caller Lab putting out a relatively sterile, this is basic, this is mainstream, this is plus, and use it however you want. And then just in an even bigger philosophical difference, Don knows that I, at least before COVID, used to do a lot of contra dancing. Contra dancing doesn't have any of these discussions. We don't talk about the list of calls that contra dancers know. What are you going to do at this dance, that dance, etc. So somehow they have a dance form that lets, I bet at a typical dance, 90%, 95% of the dancers are experienced dancers who have been to 10 or more dances, and yet newbies are allowed in at every dance and generally participate, have fun, and if it's their kind of fun, they continue doing it. And that's an interesting dance form that has the music, the social interactivity, flow, overflow. No one teaches you posture, but someone might help straighten out how you can swing your partner, because that's like the most difficult skilled piece. So I'm always coming back to, how does contra dancing do it, and what are we trying to do? And maybe I'll just throw out one more thing, because I don't think it's really worked out well. But you know, Cal Campbell's promotion of the community dance program with a set of 10 or 12 basics, and he has a great book, that red book, full of all these different dances you could do if all your dancers knew were these 10 or 12 dances. And yet I don't think the community dance program has really succeeded almost anywhere. I've often thought it would be neat to teach people up to that, and then just be able to start showing them and doing all the dances in that book. But that just never seems to happen. So those are a couple ideas to throw out.
And Michael has his hand up. Or Mickey, sorry.
Yeah. Another thing is that Larry mentioned that the SSD was also invented and designed for getting more dancers in and having more classes run. I've been teaching classes for, hard to say now, but for decades. And I mean, there are 50 calls, I think, in the SSD, or a little bit more than 50. Yeah. I see no way you can teach them properly within 12 weeks. Yeah. And on the other hand, the basic program has about the same amount of numbers. So if that is the goal, you as well could more or less often start basic classes as well. So this kind of is an argument which I don't buy, if for whatever reason. But I hardly see that to have them proper dance the SSD program within 12 weeks. I think that is not possible.
The issue you have, Mickey, is the definition of what is a proper dance is subjective. The SSD program has that many movements, the same as the basic program, but how you're actually going to explore those is very different than, as Clark put it, and I love the way you say, a very sterile 50 movement basic program, which is what it is. And it was designed to teach basic in a year, then you follow that with mainstream in a year, and then it was basic and mainstream in a year, and then it was basic in a shorter period of time. And this is what led to the problems, because that concept of a proper way of learning it. You want to learn a Ferris wheel, you learn a Ferris wheel, boys in, girls in, half sachet, whatever. A Ferris wheel is a Ferris wheel. That's the proper way. SSD doesn't look at it that way. SSD narrows it down to the standard application, the more simplified application. And I think, Clark, you hit the nail on the head as far as enjoyment, because the SSD program was designed to be an enjoyable social program. It's more fun for the dancers to dance, even though they have a very, very truncated or a limited exposure to each of the movements from a limited amount of positions. It's a much more danceable program for dancers, mainly because it's a much more simplified and enjoyable program to call for callers, as long as they don't veer off into the technical, because they don't have to work as hard as they did with the basic program. And if the caller's enjoying themselves on the stage and can emulate that out to the dancers will feel that. And if they enjoy the success, they will do it. It's a simple movement of programs. You have to set aside your concept of learn it properly, because as you say, learn it properly is then the next stage. If you want to learn the extended, if you want to learn the other non-standard, if you want to learn that, hang on, this is the way the SSD is designed. If you want to learn that, those are workshops. It's a whole completely different program. The shame that I see is SSD is being looked at as an entry program into square dance. It's not an entry into square dance. It is a program by itself, because if we say it's an entry level into modern square dancing, it means it's a new rung on the escalator into getting up there, and that's unfortunately what it's going to be. You got to set aside that perception.
I am going to bow out. Enjoyed listening, enjoyed talking. See you soon. Probably be able to make to Brad's if I have a few minutes to have some lunch before that.
Always welcome.
But carry on, guys. Maybe I'll look at the end of this thing. Good discussion. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Mel?
Yes.
I would, as an SSD caller, doing it the way you just said it should be done. I wouldn't worry about other clubs promoting their plus classes in my SSD club, because you can be pretty sure that they go there and experience another form of square dance they either like, then you would lose them anyway, or that they don't like and they come back and they say that's not what we want, and that will make your SSD group stronger.
I like that. That was the philosophy that I was taught when I learned to call in Germany. Was dancers will come and dance to you. If you're a basic caller, you're a mainstream caller, you're a +1, because that's what it was, at +2, whatever. They will come and dance to you because they enjoy to dance to you, and the program is irrelevant. They're coming to dance to you because they like dancing to you, because you give them a good time and they have a good time with the people they're dancing with. And that's what square dancing has always been for me. They come to dance because they're having a good time with each other, and I'm hopefully giving them a medium to share that good time, regardless of the program. Unfortunately, that plot was lost with the class status, or I'm not even going to say class, I'm going to say the caste status, because it's not a class or a program, it's a caste. I'm this type of dancer. That's how we identify ourselves these days. And unfortunately, with a lot of the executive run clubs, a lot of the this is our area club, we set the rules. How many of us have heard horror stories of, oh, I want you to teach a new dancer. Okay, well, I'll start with the basic program. No, well, we want you to teach this, but we want them to be dancing with our plus club in 12 weeks. Well, I'm not going to do that. Okay, well, we'll find somebody else. And they do find somebody else. That is such a common occurrence in many parts of the States, in many parts of the world now. And we've got callers that started at higher level clubs because that was it, and then they wanted to teach a basic class. They don't have a foundation. There's so many callers that started calling at a higher level, but of that, there's maybe about 5. Generously, I'd give 10% of the callers that call that are running basic classes that have actually gone back and said, right, I know I call for a challenge group, but I'm going to actually go back and learn basics, mainstream, not how to dance them, but how to build those foundations to make myself a better caller. There's a very small percentage of those higher level callers that actually deem themselves to go back because they call at such high levels. The rest of them bring all that technicality, and I think that's what you were saying, Mickey, bring all that technical aspect down and try to apply it to basic and mainstream. And of course it doesn't work because they don't have that foundation on how to build it up. They know how to bring it down, but they don't know how to build it up. And it is a problem.
And that's one thing which I think socializing and fun should be in every level. Yeah. And talking about proper teaching, I'm not talking about having dance by definition or have all 6 arrangement from everything. I'm not teaching that way in a beginner's class. Yeah, I have them in standard applications. And if I want more, then I will add that later on in the club as a workshop a theme, like I used to learn decades ago. Okay, and so this adds the spice to the dance. But if you think that, and by the way, in the SSD program in the prefix, it stands that extended applications are as well usable in the SSD program. So that does not exclude that different variations and applications are being used in SSD, and still I come back. I think within 12 weeks, you could not properly teach, and properly teach, I would say, is standard applications, with 50 calls, and the complexity even the SSD program requests, I say with my experience, I would not put my stamp and my name on it and say, yes, I can do it or I will do it. I think the SSD program takes at least 15 to 18 weeks to do it properly. And I think it's the same thing you have with the basic program. Does not mean that you have to have every possible variation in a beginner's class. No way. I think we have what Martin said, come back to dancing, keep them moving, right? And the rest comes on the longer you are in the club, you go to dances, you are with workshops, or if you want to take the next step in the next level, which recommends all those things.
Yeah. One of the things on teaching with the SSD program that has come up quite often, I had this discussion with Jerry. He ran an SSD class, and then he had an SSD group. And his SSD class had the same amount of teaching as a club dance. So the dances at that time were 2.5 hours, and then they'd cut down to 2 hours, and you had a 2-hour dance. That's what you had your 12 weeks, which was essentially 24 hours. Fortunately, most of them didn't have 24 hours. And you've got your SSD, but you've got your SSD group. So you'll do a tip for tip, or you've got your SSD and you've got your plus club. So you do a tip for tip. And well, they're getting 12 hours of dancing instead of 24 hours of instruction. But they're getting pulled through by the mainstream dance. And for the record, Mickey, I am in complete agreement with you. Very few callers have the ability to teach a 12-week program into a program that's slated as 12 weeks within 12 weeks. I mean, if you look at what do we got? We got lesson 12 is you split in your box, circulate, your fold, your cross fold, your scoot back, and your recycle. That's one night. Now try and get that in one night. You've got 2 hours plus you haven't had time to dance what was the week before to cement that into your memory. Plus you're splitting that class into a 1 hour. You're absolutely correct. It cannot be done unless you have a dedicated group and a really good group and a dedicated caller that's really good to present that. There are a few callers that can do it. Most of them that I've talked to say they do their SSD. It's 12 weeks of instruction, but it's about 15 to 18 weeks of classes because they have to put those intermittent sessions in there. So I'm in complete agreement with you there. What I liked was the way Caller Lab initially laid the thing out, going back to the Caller Teacher's Manual, whatnot, when they combined basic and mainstream into a 1-year program. They didn't say this is a 1-year program. They said this is 86 hours of instruction. That could be 1 year, 2 years, it could be whatever, but it's essentially that many hours of instruction. And then the nights were built in to have that instruction, but also included party nights, fun nights that were not part of that instruction process. And that's one of the things that is lacking, or I have not seen put into the SSD program. It may be there, but I haven't personally seen it, that it takes this much instruction and this much use to make this an effective program. So in that aspect, I would agree with you completely.
I apologize for turning this into an SSD discussion.
Why?
However, what I found out is that I always thought there is one square dance, and it isn't. Because we were thinking about having a kind of like a demo or a program at the local university. And we started talking, and somebody brought the point up, and he said, now you're trying to get dancers from genius minds. They don't want to learn 2 calls a night. They want to learn 10 calls a night because they are capable of doing that. So when I look at higher lists, I'm still into high level. These dancers dance with another approach, and that is perfectly fine. And Betsy Gotta, I guess, at the last session, Mel, you had said that there was a dancer who was afraid of going on the dance floor because there were so many A1 dancers there. And she said, you can go on the dance floor because they came to dance with you. And that's something, and now I'm back to my German background, that's something we forget. Yeah, I mean, even if they know 450 more calls, still they may want to dance 10 or 15 calls with us and having fun.
Yeah. I used to live in Lahr, and that's where I was calling. It was nothing because my fiance at the time, she lived in Frankfurt, and we would go to an evening dance. It could be in Hamburg, it could be in Heidelberg, it could be wherever, you know, or there's a dance on Friday night or on Saturday. You'd drive to Karlsruhe, pick her up, and, you know, off to Frankfurt or wherever.
Absolutely.
That was normal. And it didn't matter if it was a basic dance that we, you know, oh, Bob Moffat's calling, or Dave Prescott's calling, or, you know, Al Stevens is calling, or, you know, or we go, Gerhard Kahn's calling over here. You know, we would do this to go to these dances because we enjoyed going to those dances. We enjoyed socializing with that club, and we had a good time. And at the time, one of the groups, I think it was Jim Harrington's group in Frankfurt, it was a +1 group. I didn't dance +1. I was brand new to the activity at the time. I went up there and it was, oh, okay. So he gave me a quick walkthrough of AC Doocy and Coordinate, which are the only 2 plus moves at his +1 club that he called that night. Nobody else noticed. Everybody had a great time. He took me and Karen aside and showed us how to do this. That was the whole focus, was on every dancer having a good time. And that's what he did. And we have lost that somewhere along, I shouldn't say we have lost that. A lot of people have lost that. And unfortunately, a lot of that losing is dancer driven, not caller driven, but callers allowed it to happen. So they are ultimately to blame for allowing that to happen.
Well, let's not put the blame on the callers, but I think
I do.
We
I'm
are
blamed about it.
Yeah, well, but that doesn't help. That is, when you're looking backwards, you can blame it on them. But if you're looking forward, whose job is it to turn things around? It's the caller's job, and of course the dancer's job as well. I have a club in Karlsruhe, and we are very lucky to have about 4 or 5 squares every night. And I said, in 2 years, I want to call to 10 squares. And they said, crazy, the hall is too small. And I said, what? Come on. Then we build a bigger hall. But I said, you must open up. You must double the club in order to survive. If a few of our youngsters go to another university or stop dancing, very fast we're down to 3 squares. Yeah.
That the cut-ups?
No, the cut-ups, I do the Charlie mixers.
Oh, okay.
The mixers, yeah. La is down to 1 square.
Oh, is Lars still
Offenburg is
going?
down to 1 square.
I thought
the
Lars
whole Rhine Schiene is empty. It's really sad.
Swingers were still going, but I thought Lar folded.
Well, Söllingen Swingers, due to the corona, they used to be a very super club. They had youngsters, they had old timers, they had the whole age, but they are down to 1 square, 1 or 2 squares. They're looking for a caller. We need callers.
They should move back there.
If you come back here, you got 3-4 clubs. You can do it every night.
Yeah, no.
But the gas prices are up.
Well, what is it? It's $1.59 a liter here. So that's what is that? That's
the diesel right now is €1.75.
Yeah. Well, that's about the same here. So that's about 160, Mark 60.
Okay. I go to Berlin every 3rd week, and that doubled my costs for driving there. Goodbye, Clark.
Take care. Yeah, it is one of the things, but I have always been, callers should be calling in the activity for one reason, and that's for the dancers. That has always been, and you'll hear me reiterate that. I mean, and don't get me wrong, people say I did a radio interview at the National Convention in Ottawa. It was supposed to be one of these 30-second sound bites about the National Square Dance Convention, and it ended up being let's start off as a 30-minute interview, which is what was broadcast, but we were talking for almost an hour. mainly because of my answer. And they said, well, why did you start square dancing? And I very glibly said, I was hoping to get laid, which was the absolute truth. And I told the story because I went to a theater and this, they had a dance studio upstairs. I was actually going to go to a movie, and I saw all these girls. They had a belly dancing class in one of the upstairs rooms. So being the young 18-year-old soldier, I walked up to the balcony to say, okay, well, let's see what's going on. And I heard some country music on the other side, and I like country music. I walked in, there was a square dance club that was Kim Lidner was the caller at the time. And I got dragged in, and I've been doing it ever since. And that was back in 1981. And that was the welcome of that activity. Yeah, I was pushed and pulled through. I'd done a little bit of square dancing in high school. But Kim, and then Kim Hool, and then Dietmar Krieg, who was our round dance cuer, and all of these aspects were all about the focus on having a good time with the club, and it didn't really matter. And it was having a good time as a dancer, and that was their focus, and that's why they were successful and as fun as they were. And I think if I had, like you said, if you looked at the video, you put square dancing into YouTube today and look it up, no, there's no entertainment value for anybody that has no notice. My wife doesn't square dance. She has no interest in square dancing, and she doesn't like it at all. And her aspects, well, she was forced to do it in school here in Australia, which was wrongly taught, but she gave it a chance when she came with me. She came over to Canada when we were moving, and I was saying goodbye to a club. We had a lot of really good times. Another caller's club, walked down. I was over talking to the caller. It was a good friend of mine saying goodbye. She got a plate of food, and two dancers came next to her. One sat on either side and says, hi, so you're Elle's partner? Yeah, oh, so do you dance for yours? I says, no, I don't square dance. Oh, and they got up and left. Two other ladies got down, same kind of conversation, and then they proceeded to talk about their gallbladder operation and their kidney stones and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with the skirts crowding Helen into the, that was her experience of square. And quite frankly, I don't blame her. I know a lot of callers whose partners do not dance, have no interest in whatsoever. I'm lucky that Helen supports my activity, but I don't blame her for not wanting to dance. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop. But my focus is always, and it should always be, what I learned in Germany, which was the dancers will always come first. And the only reason that you're a caller is because there's dancers on the floor. And if you ever forget that and start calling for yourself rather than them, it's time to quit.
I met my first girlfriend at a square dance, which is my wife still. But she doesn't dance either. She quit 2000.
I remember going to some of the conventions there, and it was, you've got, 12 turntables around the floor with headphones on. You're at the square dance convention, and you've got those records. It was not unusual to buy 200 records at a square dance convention, because that, you're doing your shopping for the quarter basically, and everybody knew everybody. My first time on stage, well, it's when I was being tested for my black badge, which I don't think you have that system anymore. Was Al Stevens I had Al Stevens on stage with me, and I had, Dave Prescott, Kenny Reese, Bob Moffat, and I can't remember who the other person was on the panel. I think it could have been Klaus Herman, but on what's that, Mickey?
We don't hear you, Mickey.
Probably was not Kenny Reese. That was too early on that time when you did it. Probably Jim Harrington was usually sitting down there.
Well, wait a minute. 80.
81.
81.
Yeah, but Kenny wasn't on the board in the beginning of the 80s.
Okay, not on the board. Okay.
I couldn't. I just remember who was there, but I was absolutely terrified. I was a brand new caller, and normally Sunday morning you up there, they introduce the new callers, they're doing their testing, and there's 2 or 3 squares on the floor. Great, not a problem. I was ready for that. I walked in there, and there was, I think, it must have been about 27 squares on the floor. Oh, that's a Canadian caller. What the hell? I consider, well, I'm really quite garbage at this right now. And of course, Al, in his typical way, you know, I had the record El Paso City in my patter call, and he, you know, in the record sleeves. And of course, he looked at them. Yeah, good choice. And he put the sleeves one upside down. So I'm off the stage. And just as I start going on, the record falls out of the sleeve. So my entrance, I didn't look to see who was on the floor. Was me chasing my record rolling across the stage, coming onto, and everybody laughing. And I go, oh, here we go. And then, of course, Al was standing behind me and he says, sorry about this. And I looked at him, what? And he just let one go. So I'm going, you know, your eyes are watering. I mean, I don't know what, something died inside of him that day. And then I'm doing El Paso City, and he's got this knack of making you feel relaxed and laughing at the same time. And I was doing El Paso City, and he's in the background, loud enough that I could hear him, that nobody else could hear him. He's going, El Paso City, just doing this behind me. And I thought, initially, what an ass. You know, he's really beginning to piss me off. But he wasn't, because I was laughing and you could hear that come out. And he said, you needed to relax. And he did. And it went really, really well and all that other kind of stuff. And then the second was Jim Harrington. I was at his dance and I was asked to do a guest tip. And oh, great, new caller, do that. And I gave it my best, but I was so frustrated because the focus that everybody was pushing was sight resolution. I couldn't resolve the square. I couldn't resolve the square. It didn't matter what I tried. I set it up. They was always crossed. They were always crossed. And they would go crisscross. I don't know if he still does that, but they would crisscross. And that was the thing in his club. He'd cross them intentionally, waiting for him to pick it up. And they did that to me half a dozen times. I was so frustrated. And I thought, oh, well, they're making fun of me. I've got him crossed. I've got him crossed. Well, the dancers were all laughing and having a great time because they thought I did that intentionally. And the one time I actually got it right, they all went crisscross and really cracked up because they thought I had got them. And they thought I was doing it intentionally. I didn't realize this at the time. I finished my tip. I went out back, had a cigarette, had another cigarette, had another cigarette. This is about 4 minutes have passed. And Jim come out and said, you know what? You are a really good caller. And I looked at him, I just said, you're an idiot. You know, I couldn't do that. He said, I want you to look at that floor out there. And the dancers were still on the floor. They were still laughing. They were still having, you know, some were going crisscross. I thought they were laughing at me. And they said, no, they're having a great time. So it doesn't matter if you get up and call Alaman left, right, and left grand all night. If they're having a good time, that's what makes you a good caller.
Do you remember Rusty Russell?
Yes.
Couldn't sing.
Yep.
No choreo.
Yep.
But he was the nicest guy around. And the way he was holding the microphone and sing, everybody loved him. I mean, he was so much fun to dance to. According to our standards today, he was a poor caller. No, but he was not. He was a super entertainer. Yeah. Bob Moffat, to my knowledge, is still in Karlsruhe. But not in the squad activity anymore. But I heard he still lives in Karlsruhe.
Well, I remember he was going out with Uli at the time. And Uli and Karen, my first wife, were best friends. That's where I got to know Bob from.
I did my black badge in '83. And Dan was born a few kilometers away from where I used to live. We just found out in the chat.
Yeah, wherever the military folks were living off base at that point, I'm sure I can track it back. But yes, there are stories about some apartment building there. And
yeah. I know him.
I remember, like, you know, where you said a general came to the dance. There was one, where was I at? I'm not sure if it was Heidelberg or if it was, it might have been Heidelberg. It was one of the big, it could have been Frankfurt. Anyway, we were at the dance and he was the guest speaker, you know, open the dance, you bring the commander, right? And of course, me being a Canadian soldier in the background, he started off his speech with, so first off, I want to say, apologize that, you know, I don't square dance and like a total asshole. I said, what? And I was at the back of the room. Nobody would see me. It was like, I felt like suddenly everybody in the hall sat down and left there standing. You know, he come up to me afterwards and he said, Yeah, well, I have joined the club, I'm just starting, and we got to talk. Really, really great guy. Didn't think anything of it, but I knew he was a commanding general. I'd never run into this guy again. And about 8 weeks later, we were having our general's inspections. I was in the Armored Corps at the time, and I was working under, he was doing a tour. I was working underneath my armored vehicle, doing an oil change. And what he liked to do is go around and do his inspections and actually talk to people working on the line rather than do the big formal parade, because that would be the next day. So I'm laying on the dolly, I'm covered in grease. I've got a pair of black coveralls on, and I feel this tap on my foot. I said, "You want to slide out here?" "Yeah, just a sec." Put the oil cap on, slid out because I recognize, there's the CO's voice. Slide out, and there he is. And I'm going, "What the hell?" And he leans down and says, "Mel, how are you?" Reaches down, shakes my hand, because we met at a square dance a few weeks before. Shakes my, "I wanted to talk to you about something. Can you get it?" And he turns to my commanding officers. "Can you get us a couple chairs?" This is when I found out he's the commander of the NATO forces in Europe, doing his complete tour, talking to a young private working under a tank, going, and everybody's, "Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir." Go, "Mel, yeah, I wanted to talk to you." Shakes my hand. And for the next 15, 20 minutes, everybody's backing away to have this private conversation between the commanding of the NATO forces and a young private working on a tank, talking about square dancing. And they have no idea. It doesn't do good for a young private's reputation to have the commander go, "Mel, how are you?" It was hilarious. And, and you don't get anecdotes like that. And then, I had the same thing when I was in Ottawa. I was in the National Defense Intelligence Center at the time. There was a complete media blackout for what was going on in Iran and Iraq, because they were at conflict and forces were getting in to act as peacekeeping forces. This was before the Iraq war and all that other kind of stuff, when Iraq was still on our side. So you looked at that, and Peter Jennings, who is the anchor for ABC World News Tonight, I had met him at a dance in Lyndon Lee. His wife and my wife were both in Germany. We got along, and he was building a house in New York, wanted me to fly down and do a square dance. He was going to pay for that. Great, not a problem, love it, great gig. Then this happened. Well, I'm in the intelligence center, complete media blackout, but he's got my work number. He calls the office. "Yeah, this is Peter Jennings at ABC World News. It's nice to get, can we speak to Mel Wilkerson, please?" Young corporal. "Hi, Peter." And this is the way. "Hi, Peter." "Yeah, no." "Oh, you're going to Iraq." "Oh, okay." No. "Okay, yeah, no, we can cancel that. I can come down. Well, just let me know, and we'll make an appointment to talk." Great. I'm trying to get off the phone. But when you're working in an intelligence center and you got all your bosses around and there's a media blackout and they're all coming in, they hear one side of this conversation. So I have to turn to my commanding officer, and now I've got the commanding general, media blackout, our IS, our duty officer, all going, "Who is that?" I said, "Oh, it's Peter Jennings, World News." "Yeah, no, what do you want?" "Well, he wanted me to fly down to New York to do a square dance, but he's going to Iraq, so he had to cancel." That sounds like total bullshit. But it was true. So,
Hey guys, I gotta leave. I have to
me
prepare
too.
for tonight's session. See you later. Bye-bye.
Dan, thank you very much. Goodbye. Mel, thank you. Bye.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna
Yeah,
I'm gonna head out as well, because I got a session to get ready for in 3 hours, or
Cool.
less than 3 hours now.
All right.
Thank
See
you.
then.
This has been a lot of fun.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Cool. Bye.
Bye-bye.